All right, let's get it. It is drive time on a Friday afternoon, just after 2 o'clock. It's 2:01. We're early. We are early today. We actually are on time because we're typically very late. But hello, how are you? Happy Friday. Congratulations. You made it. Weekend time. Hope you have something fun planned for the weekend. We have a good forecast ahead. And as you know, with the way the weather pattern works, when you live in the state of Utah, the nice weather at some point will go away as we move further and further into the winter. Porter, can you confirm that we move further and further into the calendar, the nice weather starts to go away?
Yeah, the closer we get to November, December, the colder it's going to get, the darker it's going to get.
Yeah.
We're going to even see some snow.
You know what? It is the second week of September. I don't need to hear about snow yet.
Well, I hate to inform you, there was some snow in the upper mountains of the Uintas this last couple days. So, hey, just so you know.
Let me get this off my chest. I very much love fall. It might be the best time of year.
The 1 week we get of it in Utah?
Well, but it always reminds me of what's about to come. And then I remember that, that's why I like spring, because spring is the platform for the summertime, which is what I'm all about. I'm a warm weather guy. I could live the rest of my life without seeing another snowflake, and I'd be just fine.
That's fair. It's fair. You gotta either move somewhere or configure your timing out. Maybe a timeshare somewhere. But we'll enjoy it. We'll enjoy the good weather while we have it. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Spring, summer in this area is heaven.
Aren't timeshares? I feel like timeshares are a crock. I feel like it's just like
not one I'm selling. You want to? You want a timeshare in Puerto Vallarta?
Yes, actually. But I
got you.
I feel like it's just a bunch of criminals. Like it's a pyramid scheme. And then I feel like my friends that have bought timeshares never use them and complain about them. It's like a boat.
Oh, yeah. Most, I would say, I think that I watched a documentary on this once. Like the majority of that industry is kind of a racket.
And they
operate internationally, so it's kind of allowed to be.
It reminds me of people that say they want to buy a boat, badly want to buy a boat, and then they buy a boat, and then all they do is bitch about the boat that they own.
Boats, I had a boat growing up, and you can kind of back that up. Like you can use it, especially if you're like up in the mountains of Utah. Use it a few months, and then you have to figure out how to like maintain it and store it. All the other stuff, the other 9 months of the year.
Let's blow out the rundown and talk boats and weather for 4 hours today.
Can we talk some yachts?
We can talk yachts,
houseboats,
catamarans, houseboats, sailboats, whatever you want today on the show. So we actually have sports to get to. We have a good guest list, but maybe we'll just talk weather patterns, and boats on a Friday. Because, look, it's been a heavy week. It's been a rough week. Anniversary 9/11, a horrific incident in our state. So just want to start out the show today by sending out a lot of love to the community and say, I hope you're all doing all right. Hope you're doing okay. I would encourage you to reach out if you're having a rough time to family, friends, somebody you feel safe doing that with. And then most importantly, maybe get offline, get off the internet, and get off social media. It's turned into a cesspool. But a rough week in the community. I'm not qualified to say the words into this microphone to unite or comfort. Just from my seat, my vantage point, just wanted to send a big old hug out to our Wasatch Front community, the folks down in Utah County. They're still kind of processing through what happened in Orem this week. And then, just a plea for less of this, less political violence and less divisive rhetoric and discourse. We're Americans first, regardless of your political affiliation. I love my country. I hurt for my country. I'm sad for people. I'm sad for his family. I'm sad for everybody involved. This is a tragic thing, man. I'm not going to run from it. I'm not going to lean into it. We're a sports talk radio show, so for the next 4 hours, we're going to do our best to provide a little bit of a distraction, some comfort, and maybe take you away from the heaviness of what's happened this week. But just sending thoughts out to everybody who is feeling heavy this week. I know that I have. I've done my best to reach out to people that I care about when I'm in those rabbit holes of sadness and, despair and wondering what's next for a country I love. Love living here. Love living in Utah, even though I could do without the snow. All right, moving on. Big week ahead in the world of college football. We had pro football week 2 beginning last night with good, not great game. I'll tell you what, man, I think the Packers are going to have something to say about the thing at the end. Jordan Love looks awesome. That defense is nasty. If you're a Cowboys fan watching Micah Parsons, and Jaden Daniels is impossible to track down. Parsons was in his jersey all night last night. The Packers, to me, and I said this when they made the trade, I was checking the Super Bowl odds to see how far it moved. I didn't think it moved enough for them. And Vegas is still pretty bullish on the Ravens and the Bills and the Eagles. The Chiefs are in the mix as well. I'm not sure the Chiefs should be, quite frankly, after that Week 1 performance. We'll see what they do against Philly tomorrow. I was wildly impressed with Jordan last night, wildly impressed with Micah Parsons and that defense. Commanders are a good football team. And, the final score doesn't indicate a blowout, but it did not feel close. So Week 2 of the NFL got going last night. And we'll get to Week 3 of college football, the Big 12. We got some Big 12 action going on tonight. We got a ranked team in action tonight. Indiana's taking on Indiana State. So you do have some college football tonight on a Friday evening. It's kind of easy into your weekend. We'll be on air when Colorado and Houston kick off at 5:30 Mountain Time on ESPN. Houston's offense looks a lot better. Colorado's trying to figure it out post Shador and Travis Hunter. And then Fox tonight has K-State, Arizona. Now, reminder, 2 Big 12 teams, but that is not a conference game. That game was scheduled when Arizona was in the Big 12. Obviously, one eye on Utah, Wyoming, the Porter Larson Bowl, as it's known around here. AccuWeather forecast is potentially rainy tomorrow night in Laramie, about 56 degrees. Not going to be all that warm. So if you're making the trip, make sure you're prepared for all that and have a good time. Laramie in the rain. I'll be on my couch. Porter's going to be there live, so we'll go ahead and let him have that assignment. I'm just going to hang out inside. But rainy and cold in Laramie tomorrow night potentially, and Utah continues to be a very healthy favorite. So we'll preview that game tonight, or preview that game on the show today, and we'll get you ready for a jam-packed, busy weekend in the world of college and pro football on a Friday edition of The Drive. Most of our guests are football-centric, as you would expect on this Football Friday. We will do a little golf, as the Ryder Cup is around the corner, and a lot of the Ryder Cup players are playing this weekend to warm up. And I think the U.S. team is pretty stacked. The European team, to me, on paper, is a better team. The odds are on the side of the Americans as a result of this tournament being played at Bethpage Black coming up in just a couple of weeks in New York. So we'll do a little golf on the program as well. RSL finally back in action. Talked to Kurt Schmidt yesterday. The announcement that Rafa Cabral has received a contract extension, the keeper for RSL, who's been really stout this year. And the summer window acquisitions, being able to get a bit of a mini training camp, late summer, early fall soccer. So we'll see what they're able to do. Tomorrow, the kick is going to be at 7:30 against Sporting KC. You can watch it on Apple TV. Sadly, there's no radio call of RSL anymore. It just went away, which is super sad. So we'll get to some of that stuff on the show today. There was a signing in the NBA. Malcolm Brogdon is heading to the New York Knicks. ESPN did a piece today on the biggest hole for each roster in the National Basketball Association. Kevin Pelton, friend of the show. The Jazz essentially need everything. I don't know how much buzz there is around our local basketball team, but our local hockey team is receiving a lot of buzz already. As the rookies reported this week, we'll have veteran camp coming up in just a little bit, and hockey's right around the corner, and the Utah Mammoth are favored in Vegas to make the postseason, make the playoffs this year. So that's pretty cool. But a lot to do on the program today. Our first guest will be Bo McNally, friend of the show. Bo was a college football player at Stanford. He played his high school ball here. Really, really good player. He was, I believe, an honorary captain for Stanford last week when they were down in Provo to take on BYU. So we'll talk to Bo about that game, his impressions of BYU and the Stanford kind of project right now under Andrew Luck and interim head coach Frank Reich. Our friend Sammy Mora from Ute Zone stops by today. Sammy's been doing a great job with all of her Ute content, so we'll preview Utah, Wyoming. As I said, we'll do a little bit of golf today. Our guy Paul Pugmire stops by on a Friday for the local golf scene, the Big Picture PGA Tour, what's going on with Ryder Cup preparation. So we're bringing Paul today. Spencer Hall, one of our favorites, longtime friend of the show. Long time for me, one of my favorite college football writers. It's been kind of a treat for me to get to know him in this space because for, 10 or 15 years, I just read Spencer's pieces or watched him on Van Pelt or listened to some of his podcasts, and now he's become a friend of the show, which is really cool for me as a fan of his for a long time. And I'm also a fan of our guy, Christopher Kamrani. CK on a Friday, one of our Friday staples. We'll stop by to talk some college football, whatever else comes our way with CK. Are we going to get our guy live in studio today? It feels like it's nice enough outside for him to ride that gearless hipster bike he has.
I don't think so. Maybe we can peer pressure him into it. I know he usually listens to the show leading into it, so Maybe if we give him enough grief on air, he might venture down.
Tell him to put on one of his 7 Cotopaxi jackets and ride that dumb gearless bike.
Those
downtown.
are so nice.
I'm not going to lie. I am jealous of CK's jacket game. I can never be that hip. Christopher is he's way hipper than I'll ever be.
And the snow's coming, so you got to get those Cotopaxis ready.
Yes, once again, let's review. As we move further and further into the calendar, it will get colder and it will get darker. So as long as the weather is nice, take advantage of it and hopefully have something fun planned for this weekend. Happy weekend, guys. You made it. Heavy week. Let's move on and try to have some fun while keep in mind there are a lot of people across the landscape of our state and country really struggling today. Love you all. All right, Bo McNally is going to be our first guest. Excited to bring in Bo today. But before Bo stops by on this Friday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends, your good friends too at Prize Picks, it's time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Good news, kids. Your boy over here won $40 last night on Prize Picks, a little Thursday night football. Had a little parlay going, a little 3 for 3. I hit the under on Jalen Daniels. I hit the over on Jordan Love. And, Josh Jacobs scored a touchdown. I hit those 3. Little $10 parlay, turned it into $40. You can do the same on Prize Picks, and it's a lot easier than your typical sports betting landscape. If you've heard people talk about like the spread, the money line, the over/under, and you're like, wait, what does that even mean? All you do with this is you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. So, for instance, last night, one of the lines was Josh Jacobs, 0.5 rushing touchdowns. I took the over. He scored a touchdown. I nailed it. I took the under on Jalen Daniels' rushing yards because I thought Micah Parsons and that defense would be able to bottle him up, and they did. Then I took the over on Jordan Love passing yards, 3 for 3. Boom, that easy. Now, the good news is they're giving you free money, and they're also allowing you easy wins this week as they have been so far with their max discounts. So, number one, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Promo code ESPN700 to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup on Prize Picks. It is good to be right. So the max discounts they've offered you so far, week 1 was Dak Prescott, 0.5 passing yards. Yes, he went over that. And then on Sunday of last week, Lamar Jackson, 0.5 passing yards. He also hit the over. This week, they're giving you Travis Kelce, 0.5 receiving yards. So we've got a little Eagles-Chiefs coming up tomorrow, a Super Bowl rematch. If Travis Kelce catches one pass for more than 1 yard, you win. So go get their free money and then take their max discount and cash in with our good friends at Prize Picks, where it's good to be right all season long. All right. You know, in college football, when it comes to the early season dynamics, and you guys are probably sick of me belly aching about the schedule. I cannot stand the lopsided matchups. I can't stand it. Certainly when it comes to being a sports talk radio host, or if you cover the sport, if you write about the sport, if you're involved in any of the tiers of the sport, it just makes it really impossible to understand exactly who these teams are when a lot of them are playing teams that would probably struggle with Corner Canyon. And when it comes to Portland State, I'm not kidding. Like, you know, some of the best high school teams in the country, I think, could probably go toe-for-toe with some of these college football teams that some of these, the better teams are playing. And we're going to see a lot of that this week in the Big 12. Now, tonight, while we're on air, Colorado-Houston will kick off at TD-ECU Stadium in Houston, Texas. Houston's offense is much improved from a year ago. Colorado is trying to figure it out in a post-Shador and Travis Hunter world. And then about 90 minutes later, you got K-State, Arizona. So 2 good games tonight. Now, remember, K-State, Arizona, not a Big 12 game, not a conference game. This game was scheduled when Arizona was in the Pac-12. But still, a lot of questions. A lot of people still are kind of in on Arizona. You know, Noah Fafita, interviewed him during Big 12 Media Days. He is really matured and evolved. And K-State has a lot of questions to answer. If K-State loses tonight, even though it's not a conference game, we might just have to put the final shovel on top of them for now. The final, just nail in that coffin, because they have not looked good. They really should be 0-3, quite frankly. But they were able to survive Farmageddon in Dublin against Iowa State. So we'll see what happens tonight with 2 technically games involving Big 12 teams, one conference game with Colorado, Houston, and then one non-con game featuring two Big 12 teams with K-State and Arizona. But back to the original point. Baylor, who a lot of people are high on after going to Dallas and beating SMU, they welcome in Samford. Not Stanford. Yes, Samford. Texas Tech, Utah's first conference opponent that a lot of people are high on as well as a result of Cody Campbell's, check writing ability. They have curb stomped two, glorified high school teams. And Oregon State, as a result of being one of the teams kind of left out of the conference shuffle, is as bad as they've been in a long, long time. I'm sure Tech is going to roll over them. Now, what I will say about that game is it's not Utah's fault that UCLA might stink. It's not BYU's fault that Stanford is in this kind of weird pivot year where they didn't provide a very stiff challenge. So I'm not putting this on the folks down in Lubbock because at the time when this game was scheduled, Oregon State was a Pac-12 team. And, you guys remember some of those old school Utah-Oregon State games that were dogfights. Physical fights. But Oregon State's down this year. Tech will probably run them. We've got Cincinnati welcoming in Northwestern State. I mean, what are we doing here? The most impressive resume in the Big 12 and one of the top, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 resumes in college football belongs to Iowa State. They're on the road playing Arkansas State. They'll win by 1 million. TCU is playing Abilene Christian. And then Arizona State, and it's probably good for them, because they've got a lot of things to figure out as well. Welcome in Texas State. Like the Big 12 slate this week is disgusting. And as a consumer or a media member, it's boring. You should figure something out. But when it comes to trying to analyze this sport or rank this sport or whatever you're trying to do, for a team like the University of Utah, all you can do when you do not have the opportunity to show yourself against top-tier competition week in and week out is handle your business. Do what you're supposed to do. In this sport, if you do what you're supposed to do week in and week out, the chips will fall where they're supposed to. It's the random weeks where teams we think are really good suddenly look like they haven't figured anything out, where we just kind of recalibrate what we believe about them. But if you just handle your business week in and week out, then ultimately everything will kind of fall where it's supposed to. Like a lot of people this week I've heard are down on both LSU and Penn State. Because Penn State last week, they did beat Florida International. It was 34-0 at the end, but it was 10-0 at the half, and it looked hard. And Florida International is barely a college football team. Louisiana Tech is a solid program, but LSU barely beat them, and they actually needed to. They were also up 10-0 at halftime. And so when you do not handle your business the way you're supposed to handle your business, it's going to change the narrative around you. A lot of people out on Clemson as a result of them being down to Troy last week, 16-3. But the teams that took care of their business last week, namely Oregon and Dan Lanning, making Mike Gundy look like he had never coached college football before at all, a 69-3 score. I don't give a rip where you play, whether it's Eugene or Lexington, Kentucky on a neutral field. You cannot get got by 66 if you claim to be a legitimate P4 team out of the Big 12. Mike Gundy's days there might be numbered as a result of Dan Lanning just doing what Dan Lanning does. And by the way, it was 69-3 at the end of the third quarter. Oregon could have put 100 points up that game. And it's not like they were playing Bethune-Cookman, who Miami was playing. So when it comes to Utah football this weekend, Wyoming, it can be a tricky place to play. War Memorial Stadium, Laramie, Wyoming. The AccuWeather forecast to kick is 56 degrees with a good chance of rain. Wyoming beat Texas Tech in Laramie a few years ago. Texas went up to Laramie, I think that was 2 years ago, and it was really close at halftime. Texas had to rally to get that done in the second half. And no part of me believes Utah is in danger of losing the game. But when it comes to the narrative of who Utah is this year, what they've been able to do so far through 2 weeks is handle their business and do what you're supposed to do. We didn't need them to show anything other than what they did against UCLA to get off to a good start at the Rose Bowl on Saturday night on Fox, national television. It was like the final game of the college football weekend that everybody was looking forward to watching. And Utah made a statement. I don't think UCLA is very good. Of course, they lost to UNLV, but Utah did what they were supposed to do. And then if we rewind a week ago, Cal Poly, another test that is impossible to really analyze as far as how much pushback was provided. But it was over early. They never looked back. A couple of mental lapses here or there, as Devin Dampier talked about post-game, and Coach Witt did this week as well, both on his media availability on Monday and then on the Kyle Whittingham Coaches Show on our station, which comes your way Tuesday during the college football season. Coach Witt was very salient and honest about the things they need to clean up, and namely before conference play, right? Wyoming's handled their business over the first couple of weeks. We had their play-by-play voice on this week. He talked a lot about the depth of this team, and this will be Wyoming's opportunity. And this is the deal when you're a team like Wyoming, kind of on the outside looking in, when it comes to your other teams that maybe you were regional rivals with once upon a time that have moved on to what was formerly the Pac-12 or now in the Big 12. This is Wyoming's Super Bowl. You look at their schedule, they will be in Boulder, but Colorado is not near the team Utah is this year. This is by far the toughest test Wyoming has on their slate this year. And if you're a Wyoming Cowboy, if you're on that team, you know CBS Sports Network, no, it's not ESPN or Fox or ABC. This game will probably draw more eyes than any game you're going to play this year, maybe with the exception of the Colorado game because everybody watches Dion. This is a chance as a player to show the world what you can do. Maybe put some tape out there. And once upon a time, it was put some tape out there for the NFL. Now it's just put some tape out there. Certainly a chance to impress a guy like Kyle Whittingham. All due respect to Wyoming, I mean, we talked to their play-by-play voice earlier this week, and he asked me, is Utah a full $20.5 million program this year? And according to Mark Harlan, the athletic director, they are. And I want to say the number he threw at me is Wyoming's like $3 million. Paying their roster $3 million, right? So if you're a Wyoming Cowboy, if you're a defensive lineman that's playing for Wyoming, this is a chance to show out. And once upon a time, it was all about, well, can you be a pro? Well, now it's all about, well, when the transfer portal opens, can you get a program to offer you a couple $100,000 to go play for them for a year? It's like a different dynamic now. So you know those kids are going to be ready to go. They are going to show up. It's going to be a physical game. It always is up there. 7,000 feet above elevation. It shouldn't really affect Utah, but a lot of people have gone up to Wyoming. Within the first quarter, they're sucking for air. Shouldn't really affect the Utes. But this has potential to get tricky. And if you're Utah, because you really haven't been challenged by a top-shelf team this year, the only thing you can do is go do what you're supposed to do. Go do what everybody is expecting you to do. So far through 2 games, Utah has covered the spread, and they've won easily. They're 2-0 against the spread. They're 2-0 on the season, and they've run UCLA and Cal Poly out of the building. But if you don't do it on Saturday, with the way the nature of the sport is covered, the narrative will change really quickly. Go handle your business, do what you're supposed to do, and then turn your attention to Texas Tech when Fox Big Noon is in town, and Joel Klatt and Gus Johnson and that entire crew for the Big 12 opener that a lot of people already have circled on their calendar. All right, we'll catch a quick break. First break of our Friday show. We'll do more football coming up with Bo McNally, former Stanford football player, in-state kid as well, was down at Stanford BYU. We'll bring in Sammy Mora from Utah. We'll do a little golf on a Friday with Paul Pugmire. And then 2 of my favorite college football guests, Spencer Hall and Chris Camerani, in the 4 o'clock hour. And we'll go from there. Happy Friday to you. Good to have you along for the ride. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. About 3 hours from kickoff for Friday night college football, Big 12 style. It's Colorado-Houston. Then 90 minutes after that, 2 Big 12 teams are playing, but it is not a conference game. It's Kansas State, Arizona, and Tucson. That game was scheduled when Arizona was in the Pac-12. Stanford once was in the Pac-12. Utah was once in the Pac-12. Our next guest knows a thing or two about that. Always a pleasure to catch up with Bo McNally on a Friday afternoon. Bo, happy Friday, buddy. How we doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Spence. Thanks. And I want to start out because I know you of all people appreciate my son Jack more than anybody, and it's his 10th birthday today. So
Nice.
I just want to give a quick shout out, happy birthday to my son Jack.
How's our guy
big,
doing?
Big double digits.
How's Jack
He's
doing?
doing great.
Good.
You know, he's good. He's playing. He's on the Skyline Gremlin football team. He's playing left guard, sometimes right guard. He's one of their biggest dudes. He's having a blast.
I don't know what it is about the pictures you post. He just looks like a good time. I don't know. I don't know. Jack just seems like
It's
a good time to me.
exactly what he is. So the pictures aren't lying to you.
Love it, man. How's the rest of the fam? Everybody good?
Oh, everyone's great. Yeah, thank you. We're in the a busy season. You were talking about how fall is one of your favorite times of year earlier in the show, and it's ours too. We have 3 kids in tackle football this year. Our 3 older boys, and then we got a 4-year-old who's running around, and my wife is due with baby number 5 in about 3 weeks. So just about to add to the craziness here.
Congratulations, I guess. Number 5, Bo. What are you thinking, dude?
That is everybody's reaction. And we actually didn't do some big public Instagram posts announcing number 5 because we're like, most people are going to be kind of like, really? You're going to do this again? So no, but we're really excited. And we like chaos. Clearly we thrive in it.
Well, Bo, I'm the oldest of 6, and there was a time
where you get it.
Oh my goodness, there was a time where we had 6, 13 and under, and so I grew up in the chaos. And look, it really is the good stuff. So sincere congratulations to you and your bride, man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You got it. All right. So you were on this. You were an honorary captain for Stanford and Provo. Did I see that? Is that right, Bo?
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Okay, let's start there. What was that like? That must have been a really cool honor for you.
Oh yeah, no, it was really special. I've actually had just over the last, I think the first time I was honorary captain it was at Washington State back in 2017, and then I had a chance to be honorary captain for a Cal game as well. But this one was it was really special for me, and growing up in Utah, I grew up in Salt Lake. My grandpa was a season ticket holder for the University of Utah, and so I got to go to a bunch of those games growing up at Rice Eccles, and also made my way down to Provo a couple times. And I don't hold any ill will, but neither Utah or BYU offered me a scholarship out of high school, and Stanford was the one school that did. And so as a player, I dreamt of finding the opportunity to play against Utah or BYU in a bowl game, and never got that opportunity. Of course, right after I left, Utah joined the Pac-12, and then some home and homes were scheduled with BYU. But so being honorary captain and being able to be with the team. I spoke to them the night before the game at the hotel. I got to be with them, pregame on the field and locker room, and out for the coin toss. That was, truly the next best thing to actually being able to play against them. And BYU, as you know, is it's a pretty incredible environment. The fans down there, just like at Rice Eccles, are super passionate, and it's an electric environment. And got to have my kids down there and a bunch of my friends and some of their buddies and some family. So it was a great experience.
I got to know what's the reaction of your boys when they see Dad walk out like that? Are they impressed? Is it like they have to look at you like a hero, yeah?
I hope so, but they're I think luckily for me, I'm just kind of dad to them, and I've been very lucky. When we lived in the Bay Area, they've been able to have some experiences like that before, being down on the field and meeting players. And I've got buddies that are in the NFL now that have given us access. So it's a little bit, my oldest son especially, he's probably done that 7 or 8 times. So, but it is a special experience to be able to share that with them, and to get the pictures down on the field, and for them to, Scotty Edwards, who's an Olympus High School product, he interned for me a couple summers ago, and have my boys be able to give him high five as he takes the field for warm-ups and for the game. Like, that's the kind of stuff as a dad you dream of, right? To be able to do that for your kids. And so, it was special.
Well, that's the good stuff. Let's lean into your alma mater for a minute, and then I do want to talk about the game.
Sure.
How would you articulate just what I perceive to be kind of like a pivot period for Stanford football right now. I mean, look, Andrew Luck is like a no-brainer if he wants the gig, give him the gig. He's smart enough that at some point, I'm sure a guy like that's going to figure out a path to get Stanford football back to where we're used to seeing them. But how would you articulate kind of the process / progress that's going on right now with Stanford?
Yeah. So it's a really, you're right in that it is a pivotal time for Stanford. And we recognize that. Andrew recognizes that. The administration recognizes that. And it is kind of all hands on deck to get football back to where Stanford football belongs and kind of the landscape of college football. And, the hard reality is that we are playing catch up. The prior president and kind of administration of Stanford was not invested in major athletics. They didn't see the value in it, and they didn't understand that it was part of Stanford's core mission, because Stanford as an institution, and anyone who's gone there or been a part of Stanford would echo this, is what Stanford aspires to be is excellent in anything that we do, right? Research, academics, computer science, the medical school, the business school, and then major athletics like, men's football, women's basketball, men's basketball, and also all the Olympic sports. And the prior president and provost didn't really see it that way. And that was reflected in the resources and the investment that athletics got. Now, the unbelievably good news for Stanford is that we brought a new president, President Levin, and he is the one who single-handedly kind of hand-selected Andrew for this role as football GM. And he has completely changed the culture since he took over around what Stanford is aspiring to be in the athletic department. And that is reflected in who the athletic director is, John Donahue, who's a major sports exec that's coming. His first day was Monday this week. I had a chance to meet him at that BYU game. And the momentum and the energy behind and the enthusiasm behind what Andrew is doing at Stanford right now it's really unparalleled. The closest I can imagine or can compare it to is Harbaugh's kind of like, maybe 2010, which was Andrew's sophomore year, redshirt sophomore year. But even then, like, it was still a little bit unknown and wasn't sure. Now with the known quantity of Andrew and what his passion and his dedication to the program and to the mission of Stanford is, we are seeing our alumni base, both football alumni, general alumni, really rally around the program to, like I said, get Stanford caught up to this modern era of football. And Spence, I'm not sure if you've seen some of in our first couple of games, there's been these graphics on the TV copy of the games where they're showing this last offseason, Stanford was able to attract 17 players in from the transfer portal. That is more than all previous years combined. And that's a sign of the administration kind of learning and adapting to this new era. That's a sign of more players being willing to come and join our program. And, and Stanford's doing that all while not sacrificing the kind of academic integrity and overall mission of the school. And so we're getting guys to come join and be a part of this program that are Stanford men, as we call them, that are trying to be great on and off the field. And it's really exciting the way it's moving. We still have a steep mountain to climb to get Stanford back to where we all want it to be, which is competing for conference championships every year, competing for that college football playoff, and being part of the next major shakeup in major college football, and just making sure that when that time comes, Stanford has a seat at the table. And Andrew is not shy about being very clear that is our mission at Stanford football and what we're aspiring to do.
So recently, Andrew gave an interview to ESPN, and he talked about the, quote, value proposition of a Stanford scholarship. But ultimately, the recent shift, as you know, Bo, with NIL and the money that schools can pay, it really has not been a positive development for the academic schools, because one of the competitive advantages of a place like Stanford, who recently, I think, was number 4 in the latest U.S. News and World Report college university rankings, was the value of that scholarship, which is higher than those of their competitors. So how do you balance that where, once upon a time, because you referenced you weren't recruited by BYU or Utah, but my dude, you went to Stanford. Like, you had a great, wonderful educational opportunity, which is a great benefit for now your ability to go live your life. That value proposition that Andrew talks about, the gap is a little bit smaller now because of the ability that other schools have to simply pay players. How do you guys balance that as you're trying to build this thing back up?
It's a great question. It's a great challenge for us. And what we believe, both things are true, that this new era of football that's empowered these players to make money while they're playing, makes the vision of a place like Stanford harder to understand and harder to see the long-term value of a degree and a network from Stanford. That can be true, while also having the flip side of that being, we can prove that to these kids while they're at school, so that when they get there, they don't want to leave. And that is, I co-founded a football alumni group at Stanford called Stanford Football Alumni United with some former teammates of mine, some guys from different generations, and some big names like, Richard Sherman and Christian McCaffrey and John Lynch. And what we are trying to do is take this network, the Stanford network, this alumni network, and put some real structure behind it, so that when these players come to Stanford, they see what they're leaving behind. If they were to transfer out, these recruits and these parents, when they're coming on visits, are getting introduced to a very tangible representation of the value of that Stanford degree. Now, what Stanford, of course, now with revenue share and obviously the NIL portion of this and how that plays in everything, Stanford is going to be competitive paying players. We're committed to that. I don't have any inside intel into what Stanford or Andrew in the front office do in terms of how much they're actually paying kids, but I do know that there have been examples, not necessarily with football specifically, but with other sports at Stanford, where players that come to Stanford, play a couple of years, and have tremendous success in their sport and are getting offers to leave, have explicitly made the decision to stay at Stanford because they place real monetary value on the Stanford degree above and beyond what the spread might be. The difference, if it's $200,000 or $150,000 difference today, they say, well, if I go to this X, Y, and Z school, that degree, that network is far less valuable to me than what the Stanford degree can offer. So I'm willing to stay here, even if it might be for a couple $100,000 less. So it's a very real challenge. But it's from our perspective, it's more of it puts the onus on us as alumni to make sure that these current players really see the value of the Stanford network while they are there and while they are being recruited. Instead of having to wait until after they graduate, which, to be clear, that's when I found the value is I didn't quite realize what the power was until I graduated and started looking for a job and had all these incredibly people that were the very, very top of their industry taking meetings with me and making introductions and finding job opportunities for me that I didn't even know existed. And so, it's an uphill battle in some ways, but we still view that Stanford network, that education factor, as a competitive advantage for us, as long as we also come to the table and are competitive on the revenue share and NIL side.
I want to ask you about Andrew, specifically Andrew Luck, and we're catching up with Bo McNally. Played his college football at Stanford and BYU. Played a couple weeks ago. I guess it was last week. I don't remember what I had for breakfast. So Anyway, but I find Andrew Luck to be one of the most fascinating individuals in just the history of sport. I mean, you walk away after 7 years at the peak of your abilities at the age of 29. And he was so good. And we always used to talk about the Colts wasting the opportunity with a generational player under center and the pressure on that staff to surround him with better players, because you don't know how long you're going to have a quarterback like that. Now, they didn't know it was going to be cut that short. So Andrew walks away, and he could have probably played for another 5-6 years and made another couple $100 million. Stanford hires him as the GM, but it's different than some of the other GMs because he's over all of it. My understanding is it's not just football. He's over business. Like, he is the guy in charge here. I've never had a chance to meet him or interview him. I certainly would more than welcome that. What is he like, Bo, and why is he the right guy for this job?
Yeah, he's a really interesting dude. And, that kind of, I use this term in a very endearing way. That kind of like goofy, dorky, like really kind of thoughtful person you see in all of his interviews is exactly how he is in private interactions. And I was lucky enough to be a teammate of his. He was 3 years younger, and he was the starting quarterback my senior year. And while he comes across as very unassuming and kind of goofy, he is as competitive as anybody I've ever met. And he is a worker. He's a workhorse. And when he took this job, truthfully, I didn't know if it was just kind of what you're seeing with I think Shaq at LSU is like a quote unquote assistant GM. I didn't know if it was just kind of like, hey, we're trying to attach a big name to Stanford, and it was going to be a little bit more of like he shows up every now and then and shakes some hands and then moves on his way. I mean, that dude is in everything, right? Like you said, he is touching every part of the program. He is eating, sleeping, breathing Stanford football, and he believes, like I do, that Stanford football being relevant in the major college football landscape is a necessary component of college football, and it's necessary for Stanford to be a top program, and he's not going to rest until it happens. And when it was announced that he took the DM job, he happened to be coming to Utah to ski for a little bit at the beginning of the year and meet with some Stanford alumni here. And he and I were able to get together for coffee and for dinner. And I kind of went in to say, hey, I want to help any way I can, whatever support you need. I also went in to be like, what's his plan? What is, because I'm not sure what to expect. And I was blown away with, how methodical and strategic he's being, how he's, he's thinking long-term, but he's also being very tactical about the near-term milestones we need to hit in order to be able to get to those outcome goals that we're all aspiring to. And, the energy he has brought to the program right now is pretty incredible. And listen, firing the head coach in April when you've been on the job for 3 months, that takes some gusto. And then making the decision to go the interim route with Frank Reich. I mean, all of these things, like he is taking it head on, right? He's not shying away from making hard decisions and doing what he believes is right for the program in the near term and the long term. And I speak for every Stanford football alumni and Stanford alumni that I've spoken with about this. When I say this, we could not imagine a better person for the job. And Stanford's in good hands with him, and we're just all grateful that he's willing to step in and do this, and kind of be the steward for our program.
So you referenced the decision to fire Troy Taylor, spent some time here in Salt Lake with the University of Utah. He brings in his old buddy Frank Reich, and it seems like every football person has a lot of respect for Frank. Bo, all the reports I see is this is a one-year deal, period, end of story. Is that your understanding? And if so, any idea what's next with that position?
Yeah, no, that's been my understanding. And I don't have a ton of inside intel to share other than part of the purpose behind the interim coach was, springtime's a very weird time to try to hire a long-term head coach, right? Most coaches that you would want would not agree to leave their program at that point in the year, right? They feel bad about leaving their program at that time in the middle of spring ball or right before spring ball. And so the idea behind the interim coach was to make sure that Stanford has access to all of the best candidates in this next coaching cycle, right? Obviously Andrew was in town with the team when I was honorary captain. We actually got to go. Stanford had a commit in town from Eastside Catholic in Seattle playing East High School, and so Andrew and I went over there and watched the second half of that game together. And I kind of tried to get him to give me some inside intel about the coaching search. He had any names in mind, and he was smart and he was coy about it, but he just said, yeah, he's like, I'm already kind of starting to think about the process, right? The actual hiring will likely take place towards the end of the season. That's an assumption from me, not what he's told me. But as much as I've learned about Andrew and known, since I've known him for the last, unfortunately, it's been almost 20 years. He's a very methodical person. So he's gonna cross every T and dot every I to make sure that Stanford ends up with the right person in charge of the program from the coaching side moving forward.
All right, Bo, let's move over now to the game. It's, of course, as we have just outlined, this is a period of kind of a recalibration for Stanford to try to get back to where they once were under Coach Shaw while trying to understand the modern day and age of college football and the landscape and what you need to do. So where are they at right now? And what also attended to that question, what were your impressions of BYU as you were on the sidelines last week for BYU's win over your Stanford Cardinal?
Yeah, it's a great question, and like you said, I'm going to kind of hone in on something you said, because Stanford, the football program, is in a strange spot. 4 straight 3-win seasons. Three head coaches over that time period. More guys transferring out of the program than transferring into the program. It's been, it has been a difficult era for Stanford football the last 4 years. And if there's some real college football nerds listening to this, then they'll remember my redshirt freshman year at Stanford was as bad as it's been for Stanford now. My freshman year was far, far worse. Walt Harris was our head coach. He was the head coach of Pitt when Utah beat them in the Fiesta Bowl. And then he took the Stanford job after that year, and we went 1-11 in 2006. We were as bad as football teams get. And then Harbaugh came in, and we went 4-8, and then 5-7, and then my senior year with Andrew Luck as a starter, we had our first winning season in almost a decade. And when I spoke to the team Friday night, I kind of told them about my experience during that. And one of the things I challenged them with is, one of the hardest things coming out of a consistent multi-year stretch of losing seasons is believing that you've done enough to earn the right to expect to win games, because you're going to be an underdog in almost every game you go into. And I told them, and I believe this, that they have all the talent that they need, all the folks on the coaching staff that we need to win a lot of football games this year. But you've got to have some confidence and swagger, even if you got to fake it till you make it. Because believe me, that's what I had to do. And so Stanford's in a tough spot, but we've got everything that we need in that locker room to win a bunch of football games this year. And I actually, obviously the outcome wasn't what we wanted for Stanford against BYU, but it didn't. The game against BYU actually further proved my point in my mind, because the defense was phenomenal. Like Stanford's was we gave the defense gave the team every chance to win that game. Had two turnovers early in the game, deep in our own territory, and held BYU to field goals both times. Really did a nice job with defending the run and limiting the pass. And BYU is a super talented team too. I mean, their defense, I think they're number one in the country right now in rushing yards allowed. And they had a bunch of dogs, and Stanford held their own. And now our offense right now is really struggling. Like, anybody that's walked our games can see that. And it's a new system. It's a new quarterback. We've got young guys across the board, and we're like, I'm a true optimist with my sports teams. It's served me well over the course of my life. And I fully believe that Stanford has the pieces in place so long as to be successful this season, so long as we continually improve week over week. And that improvement needs to happen at every position, both sides of the balls, special teams, everything. Again, I think BYU is going to win a lot of football games this year. I think they're being smart about what to do with a true freshman quarterback and not asking a whole lot of him, and letting him use his legs and throw quick passes and not make mistakes. It's for Stanford. I'm encouraged after that game, seeing this team can compete with really, really good programs. But we just got to keep improving week over week in order to make sure that we can turn some of these, like, hey, we're competing, into, hey, we're starting to win some games. And hopefully that starts this Saturday against Boston College.
Before I set you loose, Bo, since we are the home of the Utes, I'll kick the tires with your thoughts on Coach Witt and the program right now. They're going up to Wyoming, which is a tricky place Texas Tech lost there a couple of years ago. Texas had to rally in the second half to win. Utah is a 23-point favorite thereabouts. They should roll. But Coach Witt himself called last year a debacle, and it's been a couple of years since we've seen the standard for Utah football be met, and a lot of that is health-related. But a bunch of new transfers, namely Devin Dampier, brings his offensive coordinator with him. How do you think Utah's going to fare this year, year 2 in the Big 12, Bo?
Yeah, I think last year was a little bit of an anomaly for Utah. Coach Witt and I can't remember if you remember, Spence. I'm sure the listeners don't, but I go way back with Coach Scally.
Sure.
He and I grew up in the same neighborhood and went to the same high school, and he was several years ahead of me, and I as a kid went to go watch him play high school, and he was Mr. Football in Utah, I think 1997. And one thing about that program, and I've had a chance to go talk with Scally up there a couple times, and is that they don't like the culture that they have does not tolerate, back-to-back years like what happened last year, right? And the culture that they have is that they're tough. They play hard, they play good defense, they play physical, which allows them to bounce back after a year like last year, especially when they reload with talent. Excuse me. And Devin Dampier, he's he appears to be a guy, right, that can help Utah win a lot of football games. And so the Big 12, it feels pretty wide open to me right now. And I think that Utah is one of those, 5 or 6 teams that for sure can make a run at a conference championship this year. And like you said, it's going to have a lot to do with staying healthy. And when you got a quarterback as dynamic as Devin Dampier, that's one thing you're always worried about, right? Is if he's making a lot of plays, this speed, is he going to be able to absorb that contact and stay healthy? And if he can, then I think Utah is going to be, one of those teams that's going to be in the mix in November for that Big 12 championship.
Well, buddy, I always appreciate the time. Good insight. And most importantly, happy birthday, Jack. We'll set you loose. Have a great weekend, Bo, okay?
Okay, appreciate you guys. Thanks, Spence.
All right, Bo McNally played his college ball at Stanford, was a really good player at Highland High School. Stanford, BYU last week. BYU ran over him 27-3, and we'll see what sort of test that is. BYU on a bye this week. They'll be at East Carolina next week. And we'll see how it goes down. Special thank you to Bo, and happy birthday to his boy Jack today. Brought to you today by IFA Country Stores. With IFA's Step 4 Fall and Winter Lawn Food, you'll get stronger roots now and an early green up next spring. It is the ultimate lawn owner power move. More at your local IFA or at IFA.coop. We'll catch a break. 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Sammy Mora from Ute Zone is our guest coming up on the other side. We'll preview Utah, Wyoming. Little golf today with our guy Paul Pugmire. Then the 4 o'clock hour, 2 of my favorite college football writers, Spencer Hall and Chris Comrani. Busy Friday show. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Wow, Sabrina Carpenter's voice has really changed over the past 24 hours. I thought you were bringing in Sammy. I thought she wanted a little Sabrina Carpenter. What do we got going on?
She did. I searched Sabrina Carpenter on the radio play.
Okay.
And we didn't have the song she wanted, so I just threw in some Alan Jackson.
Well, we've got to have that.
Close enough.
That Espresso song was everywhere. Was it last summer or 2 summers ago?
That's the one I knew from her, and that's the one that we don't have. So, sorry, Sammy. Here's some Alan Jackson.
Sammy Moore, Ute Zone. Sammy, we like to let people choose their walk-up song, and I'm a big Sabrina Carpenter fan like you are, so our apologies. How are you?
I'm great. It's totally fine. I just was like, let's see if they have some espresso. That's where I was gonna go. I mean, one of my friends is like, you should have went with Taste, because the first lyric is like she's 5 foot and I'm also 5 foot, so she's like, you should have went with that. And I was like, that's a little bit too extreme. We'll just go with espresso. But Alan Jackson's fine.
Next time, Porter, maybe we can get some espresso on the way out. Maybe you can look it up on YouTube or something.
Yeah, we'll find something.
Okay, we'll do something for Sammy on the way out. Well, Sammy, thank you for your time. Happy Friday. Here's where I want to start, and I started the show this way. For anybody who listens to this show, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I rail against scheduling all the time because these early season matchups with teams that are so uneven makes it really hard to analyze where we're at. But the only thing you can do if you're Utah is do what you are supposed to do. And they've done that so far, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they have 100%. I think, over 100 points or close to 100 points in your first 2 games. I think, you handle business. You only let UCLA score 1 touchdown. You don't even let Cal Poly find the end zone. So Utah has handled business for the first 2 games.
Is there anything that you are still kind of on the fence about? Dynamic, position, schematics, still kind of waiting to learn about Utah?
I think the biggest thing still is the wide receiver room. I know from week 1 to week 2, you saw, Ryan Davis got a little bit more involved. Tobias Merriweather got a little bit more involved. But I think there's still some questions around them and how are they going to, impact this team. Like, I think that, the running game, you need the running game to thrive so that the pass game can thrive. And it goes both ways. You need this pass game to open up so that it makes it easier for, Wayshawn and Nakari and Devin and the rest of the guys that are going to tote the rock for this Utah team. So I think, as of right now, it's the wide receivers. I mean, I think that this week might be another good opportunity to try and get things going. Wyoming has a very stout run defense. And so I think that it's going to be interesting to see if they air it out. But I still think that, the last 2 weeks have been a somewhat vanilla game plan. I think you saw a little bit more versus Cal Poly. There was a lot more eye candy. If you go back and watch the film, there's a lot of pre-snap movements and stuff like that kind of are going to make defenses play honest and stuff. And so I think that you might see a little bit more versus Wyoming. The caliber of opponent is going up from last week, but I still don't think we're going to see a lot from this offense.
All right, let's dig into Devin's play because, of course, quarterback is a position that, A, is always massively important, and B, the past couple of years, because of the inability of Cameron to stay healthy, we've seen a bunch of different options, and I think Devin has really inspired a lot of confidence across the landscape of our community with Ute fans being pumped about what they've seen so far. What stood out most to you, Sammy, about Devin's play through 2 games?
Well, I think it all goes back to, how he carries himself off the field. I think, a big thing that, really stood out to me, getting to know Devin over the last few months is just his attitude and how he approaches the game and stuff like that. Like, he loves to say that, like, he lives where his feet are. And so, this is a guy that's taking it one snap at a time, one play at a time. And he's not, letting outside circumstances affect what's going on in-house. And I think that that's something that, you've really seen trickle down throughout the rest of the team. The vibe around this team feels very different from last year. But I think on the field, the biggest thing for me with Devin right now is his completion percentage. Like, that was a big thing they wanted to get up for him. And through the 2 games, he's a 79.2 completion percentage, which, there is still a lot of games to be played and stuff like that, but that's already a career high for him. Like, last season, he had a 58% completion percentage. His 2023 season, it was a 62% completion percentage, but he didn't play a lot. So I think that, that bodes well for me, at least in terms of what he's capable of doing. I think, big thing with Kyle Whittingham is keeping the ball safe and keeping it protected, and he hasn't turned it over yet. they've done what they needed to do, and he's also worked on that completion percentage while he's at it. But, Devin is just as dynamic as, we all thought he was going to be. I think, you got a little glimpse of that versus UCLA and like Cal Poly. It was a get in, get out type of game, but he still had some flashes. We saw him take some more downfield shots. He didn't take as many hits versus Cal Poly as he did versus UCLA, which I know was a big thing that Kyle Whittingham wanted him to do, is take less hits. But, through 2 games, I think Devin has performed pretty well.
So let's stay in the quarterback room, and it was announced that as far as QB2 goes, it would be Isaac Wilson. And so far, when we've seen the backup play, it has been Burt Ficklin. And, man, this kid's got some juice. I mean, there's a lot to like about what we've seen so far. Does it feel like Burt has established himself as QB2? What's your understanding of the dynamic in the room behind Devin?
Well, I think that Kyle addressed it pretty well, both on Saturday and on Monday. He said that, it's a mixture of Isaac has a red shirt that they can use, and they want to see what they have in Bird. I think that Bird can, if God forbid something happens to Devin, if Bird could handle things. I don't know. It's been such a small sample size with him, but his performance versus Cal Poly was pretty dang good. 4 of 4, 53 yards, an additional 55 on the ground, and the 2 touchdowns, including the one where he literally just took the Cal Poly defender and just stiff-armed him right into the dirt, which, made everybody in the press box, like, insane. The reaction was great up there. But, I think that Bird is good. I think I've said it before that I think Bird is a very similar quarterback to Devin in terms of the way that he plays. He can sling it, and you could see it. He had some zip on some of those balls last week, but he also has the ability to get out of dodge, and you also saw that. And I think that, Bird and Devin are cut from the same cloth in terms of their style of play. As for Isaac, Kyle said that they have a red shirt for him to work with, so you might not see him as much this year, but I think that, as long as Devin stays upright and healthy, I don't think this is going to be a major talking point this season.
I agree. Now, you referenced the wide receiver room and the weapons that Devin has at his disposal. I have a 2-part question, Sammy. Have you noticed any of these targets kind of, I should say, have you noticed Devin have you noticed him favoring anybody? Does it seem like he has a tendency to look one way or the other? And attendant to the question, which of the targets have stood out most to you so far as potentially becoming more dynamic?
I think, the safe answer is Ryan Davis. They played last year at New Mexico together, and at New Mexico, RD was very much Devin's safety blanket, and he would get the ball to Ryan and let Ryan make the play. And I think you're kind of seeing that again this year at Utah. Ryan had his first career touchdown as a Ute last week, and I think you could see that connection was building. And Devin and Ryan have that pre-established connection, which was good when both of them decided to come to Utah. That was something that, gave me a little bit of hope that Devin wasn't going to be building chemistry with every single wide receiver from January to now. He had someone that he had a pre-established connection with, and then he was getting comfortable with. But I think, Tobias has started to really have a couple more targets. He was targeted 6 times last week versus Cal Poly. A couple of them were deep shots. There was the one that Devin just put a little bit too much air on, and then there was another one that if you go back and watch it, the ball ended up behind Tobias, but, the ball slipped in Devin's hand. It was during that little rain burst that they had. But I think that, I think Tobias could be that game-changer guy that opens up the rest of the pass game for Utah. He has that long stride, big catch radius. He's able to make some contested catches and stuff. So I think that, it's going to be interesting to see how these two. I think those two are going to probably, by the time the season's over, those two are probably going to shake out to be your top 2 receivers. I think Larry Simmons is going to be in that conversation as well. The Southern Miss transfer, he didn't, he had the illegal touching catch versus UCLA, which, that's not a penalty you see called very frequently anymore. But I think that he's someone that could be another, deep threat, bust something open type of playmaker for Devin.
We talked preseason, Sammy, about the running back situation, and it's kind of manifested in exactly the way you said that it would, with Wayshawn and Nakari really sharing the bulk of the reps. Devin's second on the team in carries. Nakari's got 23. Wayshawn has 17. Wayshawn has the 2 most explosive plays of the season, both on the ground and through the air. But what do you make of what we've seen so far? What do you like, and how do you see it continuing?
I think that we're going to continue seeing it how it's played out. I think, Kyle even said that, until someone starts getting a really hot hand, that's just what's going to happen. And I think it's actually for the best, with the constant rotating in and out of those two guys, it's keeping guys healthy. And it's not like so frequent rotation that guys can't get into a rhythm and stuff. You're seeing, Nakari play a drive, and then you're seeing Wayshawn play a drive, unless something happens, down distance situational thing where one of them needs to come in favor of the other. But, I think they've performed pretty well. I think Nakari has kind of established himself as that short distance kind of back. He had the 2 scores versus Cal Poly. Both of them were inside the 2, I think. But Nakari is very much that guy, whereas Wayshawn is the speed guy. You saw that. You've seen that on all of his touchdowns this year, especially that reception touchdown. He just turned on the jets, and it was off to the races. And he's a fast guy. He's fast and he's hard to bring down. So I think that, both of them have a specific role in this offense, and they're being utilized to that ability when they're on the field.
All right. I had a friend refer to the offensive line as like bar bouncers, because when you watch them, they just pick up the opposition and just throw them around. I don't know that I have a question, much as I just want your observation. Of course, it was the positional group we were all most confident in. And through 2 games, they've lived up to the hype, yeah?
Yeah, 100%. I think, Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu are still 2 of the most dynamic tackles in the country. Tanoa Togiai has, he's played at a high level through the first few games as well. Even though Jaron and Jaron Kump and Michael Mokafisi, didn't see a lot of time versus Cal Poly, or didn't play at all in Jaron's case, they still had good moments versus UCLA. And even the guys that stepped in for both of those guys when they were out last week, which was Keith Olson and Alex Harrison, they played at a good level too. So I think that, from top to bottom, I still have the most confidence in this offensive line room. Olson is going to be a key part of that offensive line next year. And I think that it's good that they're getting him out there and getting him as much experience as possible so he can just slide into that role next year.
The dynamic of defensive players being used as offensive weapons so far have been pretty entertaining and also very useful, and it's worked. Coach Witt, on a number of occasions, has talked about Jackson Benny, who had the pick 6, and we've seen a little bit on offense. So, whether it's Lander or Smith or now Jackson, give me some of your takeaways watching these defensive players be utilized on the other side of the ball.
I think, Jackson's probably one of the more intriguing ones for me. He's been playing a little bit of wide receiver, and I was asked about this over on Ute Zone this week about, why are they playing Jackson instead of someone like Larry Simmons? And I think it all comes down to Jackson's speed. His top-end speed is insanely fast, and I think Kyle even referred to him as someone who can blow the top off of a defense. So I think that getting Jackson out there is just going to make things easier for the rest of the guys, because you're getting, you're going to have shallow crossers open. You're going to have stuff over the middle open because Jackson's, running those deep routes 9 times out of 10. Lander, he had the touchdown. I think Utah's tight ends are fine. Good. I shouldn't say fine. They're very talented. Dallin Bentley, J.J. Buchanan, Hunter Andrews, that group. They're very good. So I don't think Lander's playing tight end, I think, is very much more of a situational type thing, because you have other tight ends who are able to produce at a high level. As for Smith, he's one of those guys that, when they put him out on the field, you never know what he's going to do. You've seen him run some routes. You've seen him be put in the running, in the backfield as a running back. Beck loves to use that bubble motion to get him going and hand him the ball and stuff. So, it's fun. It's a different way to roll it. And I think that, until other guys can start producing at a high level, specifically in the wide receiver room, I wouldn't be shocked if it continues. But I think at the end of the day, I've always been a big fan of get whoever's on the field that's going to help win games. And if that includes the 3 of those defenders, getting them on the field to play offense, then do what you need to do to win the games.
Moving over to the other side of the football, Sammy, one of the questions we all had was that defensive front was replacing 5 players from a year ago, either graduation, NFL, or transferring, like Keanu did down at BYU. Early returns, defensive front, Utah football sound like what?
Good. Very good. From my vantage point is what I say. The 5 defensive ends that you've seen rotate, every single one of them now has logged at least half a sack, which, I don't think anyone had John Henry Daly as the leading sack leader on this team at this point in the season. I think most people thought it was going to be Logan. But, I've been really, really, really high on John Henry, even going back to spring. JHD has been one of those guys that we've heard so much about throughout the fall, or throughout at tail end of last fall through spring this year and into this fall. And, to see him getting going early is very beneficial for this Utah defensive line. And I think, when Logan comes back, pairing the two of them together, I think that could honestly be a very, very, very successful pass rush unit. And then on the interior, Dallas goes down early in that UCLA game, but ever since then, I haven't noticed that much of a drop-off. Aliki's been playing at a very good level. Jonah Le'a has been playing well. And then the freshmen, Carson Kafusi, Pupu Sapalona, both of them have gotten in there and made some big-time plays. Both of them had some big stops versus Cal Poly. And I think, early returns on them are good. Obviously, the level of competition the first 2 weeks, especially for defensive tackle, hasn't been that great. Cal Poly and UCLA weren't able to, especially UCLA, they didn't have that great of an offensive line, so literally nothing could happen with them. But with Cal Poly, their running game struggled even in their first week. So I think that, it's going to be interesting to see how they shape up when you get into conference play, when you have some teams that have some very, very, very good and very powerful running backs. But early returns from my vantage point have been pretty good.
So if Wyoming is to make this interesting, what does that look like? They've got a running back so far that's off to a really good start to the season. They've got a couple good linebackers. We had their play-by-play voice on this week, and he was lauding the depth that they have there that they haven't had in quite some time. You already kind of touched on this earlier when I brought you in, and Utah is a heavy favorite. The weather looks like it could be a little hairy, about 56 degrees. There's a slight chance of rain. Laramie can get weird. Texas Tech lost up there a couple of years ago. Texas had to rally themselves. It's an odd trip. I'm old enough to remember WAC days and early Utah, Wyoming, back and forth. I don't know that the elevation affects Utah, although it is higher. It's 7,000 feet above sea level. So if this game gets weird, Sammy, what does that look like?
I think it's going to be mainly the secondary, Utah secondary. Caden Anderson is going to be the first, true pocket passer that Utah's had to face all season. And I think, he is coming into this game not 100%. He has that upper body injury, but, he can sling it. And I think that, after a subpar performance last week versus Cal Poly, these corners are going to want to redeem themselves, and they're going to want to redeem themselves bad. And so I think that's probably the biggest area where, things could go awry is in the passing game. But I do think that, Utah has the benefit of the doubt with this pass rush. I think if they can get to Anderson early, I think that he might be hearing footsteps, mistakes might be happening. He might play a little bit, I don't know how to phrase it, but he might be playing a little bit lighter to protect himself and stuff like that. But I think that the secondary is the area where this is going to get dicey. I think if it does get dicey, I fully think that Utah's offense should be fine versus Wyoming's defense. Devin Dampier's played against them now. This will be the third time, and they've never been able to stop him. I talked to somebody who covers Wyoming this week, and he basically said the biggest area of concern for him is Devin Dampier. This Wyoming defense has not been able to stop Devin in the last two showings, and so I think that's something that, is going to benefit Utah. Ryan Davis has played against this team before. Nakari was hurt last year, so he hasn't played against them. But I think, there are guys who have experienced this situation before in this area in Laramie. I mean, Justin Stevenson transferred from Wyoming to Utah, so if anyone knows what it's like to play in that arena, it's him. But I think that, I think my biggest thing is the Utah secondary right now is they're going to need to figure things out and figure it out fast, because next week it just gets a whole lot tougher.
You referenced Dallas. Vakalaki will want to get him back soon. I know they held out Jaden Kump, Logan Fano. Do you have any insight on the current state of the health overall and who may be held out coming up tomorrow night?
I honestly have no clue. We hear things throughout the week and stuff, but, I think it is a good sign that Kyle Whittingham said that, there hasn't been nothing, he's not worried. He hasn't mentioned any season-ending injuries yet, but, photos were posted earlier in the week, and I know Rabbit was posting in a photo from practice. Mocha Fisi was in a photo, so I think that, they're practicing. Those two at least are. We don't know about the rest, but those two are practicing, so that should be, help should be on the way at some point. I know, Rabbit hasn't taken a single snap this year, and the hope was to get him back before conference play and stuff, so it's going to be interesting to see. Next week is the first week where we actually get injury reports, so it'll be a lot easier to figure out who's, playing, who's not going to play, even though we all know Kyle will probably say everyone's questionable at some point. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see as of right now. You know, we'll see who dresses, and then we can go from there.
Laramie, about a 5.5-hour drive thereabouts, and you know the Rose Bowl, a nice road road trip, or simply just trip that Ute fans could have been able to take if they chose to go in that direction. Any idea what sort of Ute fan contingent will be there in Laramie tomorrow night?
I have no idea. I know that there is going to be some Utah fans that are going to make the trip and stuff. A lot of people were kind of looking forward to this trip to, you know, relive Mountain West days and stuff like that, but Utah fans do travel well. I don't think that's ever a question. And I think for kind of like how it was with the Rose Bowl, they're going back to someplace they know, albeit it's been over 10 years since they've been to Laramie. But, you know, I think that there's going to be Utah fans there. They're going to make their presence felt. And that's a small arena, so you're going to be able to tell them, like, that's a small stadium. You're going to be able to find the Utah fans from a mile away, especially because their colors are vastly different from Wyoming's fans. But Utah fans are going to be there. I just don't know how many. I haven't seen as many people talking about going to this game as I did about the Rose Bowl and stuff.
We'll end where we started, which is my opening segment with the show. When it comes to games where you're heavily favored early on in the season, all you can do is do what you're expected to do, and the chips will fall where they're supposed to. Before I set you loose, have you seen enough combined with Utah's performance over the first two games and what you've witnessed with other teams in the Big 12 to believe that this is a season that Utah has a chance to say something about this Big 12 conference year two?
I think they do. I think, you know, next week versus Texas Tech is going to be the first big test for both Utah and Tech. You know, Tech plays Oregon State this weekend, but before that, they have just played a bunch of smaller schools, and also Tech hasn't even left their home stadium yet this season, whereas Utah, this will be their second road game. They've played at home, and I think that, you know, Wyoming is by far the biggest test that they have faced up until this point. You know, everyone thought UCLA was going to be the big test, but looking back on them now, they don't look that great. I think Utah can make an impact on this Big 12. I think they can make a run for the title. It's just healthy, keeping everybody healthy, and, you know, doing things the Utah way, keeping the ball safe, scoring, playing sound defense, forcing turnovers. But I think, you know, if everyone stays healthy and everything goes to plan, I would not be shocked if Utah makes a run for the Big 12 championship.
Sammy, where can people go find your work?
You can join us over at utezone.com, which we call the greatest Utah community on the internet. Lots of VIP content, recruiting. We have a VIP podcast, lots of VIP content. Also a message board you can join and come talk to some of the greatest Utah fans you'll ever meet. And you can find me on Twitter at @S_Mora247. Just random musings about, you know, Utah and other sports items. Now that NFL season, you'll probably see an NFL tweet here or there, but nothing massive.
And Sammy, you have my word. The next time you join us, Sabrina Carpenter will be your bump music bringing you in, okay?
Thanks, Spence.
All right, Sammy Mora from Ute Zone. She does a great job at @S_Mora247. Ute Zone is the place you should go as a Ute fan to get all the good content. Some couple great previews of the game tomorrow. Yeah, Wyoming's got a couple really good running backs and a really, really good linebacker so far as the PFF grades go. Utah healthy favorite. The Sam Scott kid is averaging over 5 yards per carry. Caden Anderson, who is expected to play, did have to go to the hospital last week after an injury to his upper body. Braden Johnson is their linebacker, who is the highest graded player according to PFF. But Utah hoping to head up to Laramie in the Porter Larson Bowl, as it's coined around here, and handle the Cowboys easily. Hopefully it's an anxiety-free Saturday night. With IFA's Step 4 Fall and Winter Lawn Food, you'll get stronger roots now and an early green up next spring. It's the ultimate lawn owner power move. More can be found at your local IFA or at ifa.coop. 4 o'clock hour today, Spencer Hall and Chris Camerani, two of my favorite college football writers. We'll take a little break from the football, and coming up on the other side, we'll get a little Ryder Cup preview and see how the U.S. squad is shaping up, and talk a little local golf as well. Paul Pugmire stops by on a Friday edition of the show. Happy Friday to you. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. Let's see, what's the date today? Friday, September 12th. We are 2 weeks away, exactly 2 weeks away from the start of the Ryder Cup at Bethpage State Park in Farmingdale, New York. We got the Procore Championship. Yeah, that thing is going on right now. But it is relevant because we have some Ryder Cup players, not just playing, but playing well. And a local guy in the top 10 is Zach Blair, 7 under par. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis to talk about the world of golf. Paul Pugmire, happy Friday, sir. How are you?
Doing great. Spence, 2 weeks out, and we're already vibrating.
Yeah.
This is fun stuff.
Can't wait. And, I'm seeing Patrick Fishburne is actually having himself a nice little tournament as well. So tell me about the Procore Championship. It's in Napa at the Silverado Resort, and obviously with the undercurrent of the the Ryder Cup. World Cup's in 9 months, the Ryder Cup in 2 weeks. It's good to see the majority of the field, as far as what I'm witnessing here in this tournament. It sounds like Xander's wife is delivering a baby, so he's with her, which you totally understand. But it feels like this tournament has a little bit extra gravitas as a result of the Ryder Cup coming up, yeah?
Yeah, no question. The DP World Tour, the European Tour, still is completing its season-long points. And so all the European Ryder Cup players are involved in that because they're facing the points. And all the Ryder Cup players in America on the U.S. team, of course, they don't do that because Captain says, guys, I want you playing. I want you tournament tough and getting reps in. So come to Procore. And as you noted, Schauffele got a pass because his wife is having a baby. And obviously, Bryson DeChambeau can't be there because he doesn't have qualifications to play on the PGA Tour. The other 10 are there. And Keegan Bradley is there, and he's walking around talking to people. He's not playing. He is in captain mode. And it is just so fun to see. You look at the top 3 players on the leaderboard, and they all share a characteristic. Oh, yeah, they're on the Ryder Cup team.
So last time around, only Justin Thomas and Max Homa played the Procore ahead of the 2023 Ryder Cup. And we all remember what happened there as the Europeans just curb stomped us. It was not even close. Do you think that lesson is kind of tied into the decision making of these 10 players to play that, or do you think it was Keegan kind of encouraging them to not just play but be together, right? Because that's a big portion of what the Ryder Cup is about.
Building the camaraderie and the team aspect of it, no question, is a benefit. But it's equally no question that the lesson was learned that the American players went in flat because they had been off for 3 or 4 weeks, and they weren't game ready. And where that really showed up was in Friday morning 4-ball. We got smoked, and we were flat. And the matches weren't even close. Nothing got to 18, and bam, we're down 4 points to start with, and never really recovered from there. And so yeah, the lesson was learned, and there's no question that not going to repeat that mistake.
So when it comes to just simply the dynamic of utilizing the world number one, okay, so that I've listened to a couple of interviews and a couple of pods previewing the Ryder Cup, and they've all honed in on, and we talked about this last week. Like, honestly, on paper, I feel like the Europeans might have more talent. I just thought, I thought Lucas knocked it out of the park when it came to his selections. That's a really, really dangerous team. But we have that dude. We have the one guy that every player, including Rory, has said, when I show up to a tournament, I know I've got to beat Scotty. How do we utilize him best?
What a great question, and I'm gonna see you and raise you before I address Scotty. I think we've got 2 dudes. I think that DeChambeau is a person who is big enough in personality and in mental strength, and big enough in his game to overpower the black course at Bethpage and to overpower an opponent. And I think that we've really got 2 alpha horses in this whole event. That is a whole bunch of alpha players. But in terms of Scotty Scheffler, it's been so fascinating to watch him the first 2 rounds at Procore. He is clearly scraping it. He is clearly leaving shots out there. He is clearly frustrated, and yet where is he? He's in the top 10. And he knows, and everybody else knows, that he will learn what he needs to learn. He'll make the correction, and he'll be ready at Bethpage, and you better look out.
So Scotty did some media prior to the start of this tournament, and he himself talked about how he's changed his preparation. He had 2 matches and lost 2. So he left Rome without winning a single match. And for the first time, and look, I love Scotty, what's not to love, but he sometimes can come across as a little robotic. And, he showed some real emotion. He was in tears after the Rome match was essentially settled, and he knew that he was getting on that plane without winning one match. Do you have any insight on this different preparation that he's already talked about to make sure that we don't see what we saw in Rome?
Scotty has a real interesting duality to his character, to his personality. He is not flamboyant. He is not charismatic, but he has a deep, white-hot fire in his soul to compete at this game, and not only to compete, but to dominate the golf course, dominate whoever's in his way that he needs to dominate to play to win. Scotty has a deep fire, and it gets lost sometimes because he's a genuinely nice man and genuinely soft-spoken. And like I say, he's not charismatic. He's not gonna get a TV show, not gonna get a sitcom and make it work. But holy cow, he will play the game, and he will step on your throat and twist his spikes and then move on to the next hole.
Help me understand the process that Keegan and other captains have to go through and how it works when they select certain golfers for certain formats when it comes to the Ryder Cup, whether it's pairing them together based off of past results or maybe trying something new if things haven't worked. Like, what really is on Keegan and his assistant captain's plates when they're going through the process of selecting which players match which format based off of form or history or whatever that looks like?
What a great question. And the reality is, once you get to the golf course and once we're ready to start play, that is the biggest thing left, maybe the only thing left that a captain has to affect the outcome. First of all, just a little context here. The format by which pairings are made in the Ryder Cup is different from the format by which pairings are made in the President's Cup. In the President's Cup, the captains get together in a live public press conference, and they go back and forth. They say, match 1, here's my guys. Okay, who are you putting up against them? Okay, match 2, the person who went second now goes first. Here's my guys. Who are you putting up against them? And it's like a reciprocal draft back and forth, and it's really cool to watch. In the Ryder Cup, the captains fill out the lineup card the way a baseball manager fills out a lineup card, and then the way baseball managers will go to home plate before the game and exchange lineup cards, that's what the captains do. And so there's a whole bunch of 3D chess going on. You have to match the personalities. You have to match the game strength to the format of that match's format. Is it alternate ball? Is it the 4-ball, or is it how does that play out? You have to consider what golf ball they play. If it's alternate ball, and you've got one of your guys playing Titleist and the other guy playing Callaway, is that going to affect the play of one or the other? And that's something you talk to them about, because they don't get to switch balls once the ball is in play on a hole. And so those are the considerations that they have to do. And it is nuanced and subtle. You are talking about minuscule differences at the top echelon of the game. But they can be differences that make a difference. And that's where the genius of a great captain comes through. And the greatest captaincy ever, in my view, was 2008, Paul Azinger, where he achieved a victory for the American team after they'd been shellacked a few in a row. And he went after it in a kind of a non-golf traditional way. He brought in as one of his top advisors a sports psychologist and matched people up in the way and organized things in the way that the U.S. Navy SEALs organizes its assault forces, and he went at it in a very different way, but it was wildly successful.
Tell me about the reaction to the announcement that Keegan was going to be the captain. Again, this is the portion of our conversation where Paul teaches Spence about golf, but it does seem like a lot of people were surprised when it was Keegan who was named. Is it because that he's a little bit younger? Is it because he's still a really good player? Did it feel like it was a make good for him being left off and not being able to go to Rome? It does feel like a lot of people were surprised when it was announced that Keegan got the gig.
Yeah, no question. And let me take the makeup for Rome off the table, but all the other elements were a part of it. Yeah, Keegan is very young to be a captain, and Keegan is still a relevant player, which he has totally proved. And he had been an assistant captain on the President's Cup side, but he didn't have a whole bunch of experience. What he has is a commitment to the Ryder Cup and a fire for the Ryder Cup, a passion for the Ryder Cup. And he also has a likability quotient that is just so high. The players on the tour like Keegan Bradley. And that's been a fascinating thing to say, because Keegan has gone around saying the biggest difference in my life since being captain is I have gotten to know and build relationships with people that I hadn't before. And yet all the other players are saying, hey, we always loved Keegan. we always thought he was great. And so you put those two together, and I think it was a really good pick. And it's been fascinating to see Keegan Bradley step into it and really become this leading figure in the game in a way that you just don't see for somebody who is still so young. He's still got a lot of career left.
Read a piece on NBC Sports comparing Keegan to Paul Azinger in 2008.
Yeah.
You like that comp?
I do. I do. I think they're very similar personalities. They're similar players. The one difference is Azinger was much older and certainly older in not only in life, but certainly older in his golf career when he was captain. He was no longer a relevant player in the way that Keegan Bradley still is. But take that difference aside, and they're standing in the game, their personality, they're both fiery people. They both actually Azinger had more history in the Ryder Cup. Plus, Azinger was involved in some of the Ryder Cup dust-ups in past years. He got, face-to-face with Seve Ballesteros at one of the Ryder Cups, and of course, Seve is really on both sides. Seve is the patron saint of the Ryder Cup, and Azinger got in his face and said, "Hey, I'm not going to put up with your gamesmanship," so. I like the comparison. There are a couple of differences, but I think they're very similar people.
If this turns into an all-out brawl, who wins? I don't feel like the European team has very many good fighters. Tommy Fleetwood couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. Rory's like 5'2". John Rahm and Ludwig's a big dude. Sepp's a big dude. I feel like if it turns into an all-out brawl, we've got him.
Do you want a piece of Bryson DeChambeau?
Actually, yes. I think he's a fake tough guy. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change my mind. I'm looking at our roster: JJ Spawn, Xander.
I don't want JJ.
No. I actually think there are zero good fighters on both teams. Golfers aren't fighters.
Okay. No, this is a fun analysis. I actually haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, JT's not fighting anyone. Morikawa. No. Ben Griffin, Cam Young. There's no way Cantlay has ever even thrown a punch, Paul. We're screwed now that I think about it.
I do want maybe people to gang up on John Rahm and hold his ankles, but yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it, Spence. I'm going to have to give that some thought.
We do have Gary Woodland as a vice captain, and he is a former college basketball player. I feel like Gary could handle himself in a fight.
Gary can handle himself in a fight, and he wasn't just a college basketball player. He was a decorated Big 12 player at KU. And he's a big dude. Yeah, he'd be just fine.
Okay, I can tell I'm making you uncomfortable, so let's move on. What is so the role of a vice captain? We got Jim Furyk, we got Webb Simpson, Brant Snedeker, Kevin Kisner, and the aforementioned Gary Woodland. What is the role of a vice captain in a Ryder Cup scenario?
That is different for each of the Ryder Cups, for each of the captaincies, each of the captains' teams. The captain will pick the vice captains, and they generally pick them for specific jobs. And so it will be something that Keegan Bradley assigns a specific captain to do, to help with during the course of the way things are flowing. It might be to walk along with a player who needs some support. It might be to keep track of certain statistical things. It might be something in the team room. And the team room, that is a sacrosanct and pretty, let me say, secret place. Nobody knows very much about what goes on in that team room, but the captain controls it, and he might have something there. When he picked Gary Woodland to be the vice captain, my first thought was, that's team room stuff. Woodland is this tough guy. He is a major championship winner, won the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach, and he is a recent cancer survivor. This guy's tough, and he can say, hey, I've looked down a pretty dark path, and I've come back. You can go win this match. And I think that might be exactly what Bradley wants Gary Woodland in the room for.
All right, I want to ask you about a couple of individual storylines here. I did not watch in Whistling Straits in 2021, but we smoked them. And Scotty, Bryson, Harris, Xander, JT, Colin, and Cantlay were all on that team, and they combined for a record of 16-4-5. How much of the picks do you believe are steeped in what happened in Whistling Straits?
First of all, let's talk about the most important thing that happened at Whistling Straits. That was the pick of Scotty Scheffler, and then what happened with that. Scheffler was picked on that team prior to him having become a PGA Tour winner. He simply showed something that the captain's team wanted on that team. And then they rolled him out in singles against Jon Rahm, and Scheffler took him out. That remains one of the real superlative Ryder Cup performances in recent years, when Scotty Scheffler beat Jon Rahm at Whistling Straits. And I think that was Scotty Scheffler's coming out party, and that was the turning point in Scotty Scheffler's career. Since then, he's been nearly untouchable. But what you have coming out of Whistling Straits is the experience of winning. And, you know, we've talked about this in different contexts. Let's go back to it again. Winning is a skill. It must be learned, it must be acquired, and it must be mastered. And that experience at having won a Masters Cup, putting it back in the team room, putting it back on the course, especially on Sunday afternoon in singles, that matters. And I am just certain that Keegan Bradley wanted to have some of that on his team.
Rory's an interesting case study all the time because he's historically special, and it's been a weird year in a lot of ways because he has achieved history and also behaved like a child. But as of late, he has played some of the best golf that we've seen since he was able to complete the career Grand Slam. Just how much of an ace in the hole is Rory McIlroy for the Europeans?
He scares me. Now, normally I'm a big Rory fan, and it's easy to cheer for him. But let's put this in context. Rory has talked openly about what his goal set is at this point in his career. It's not money. He says he doesn't even notice when things hit on the Wednesday direct deposit. It's not even wins. He says, yeah, I've won enough. He says, but there's a handful of things that really matter to him. He wanted to win the Masters and complete the career Grand Slam. Done. He wants to win national championships. He thinks national championships matter. He played in the Irish Open this year, something he has done, hasn't always been there. But he just went back because he's playing in national championships. Done. The other thing he has really talked about is win a Ryder Cup on U.S. soil. That scares me a little.
All right, let's move over here because there are some, proven players, as we've discussed. There are also some rookies. With Russell Henley, he has a 3-1 record in the President's Cup. That was 24. J.J. Spahn is a U.S. Open champ. Let's see. I think, Ben Griffin as well, with very large sunglasses, but he's had a great year.
Yeah.
Cam Young, my guy, New Yorker at home. Of the rookies, who are you most confident in, and is there one that might concern you a little bit?
The one I'm most confident in is Ben Griffin, and I'm not saying it because he's leading at Procore. I'm saying, hey, look at who's leading at Procore. Griffin has simply been on a sizz. He's got a rock-solid game, and he's playing well. And look, these top players in the world, when they are in form, they're not going to lose. Nobody's going to beat them. Any of the 24 players in this field, if they are in form and on their game, they're going to win. And right now, Ben Griffin is in form and on his game.
Who do you favor? And how important really is home advantage when it comes to Bethpage? And as we discussed last week, the U.S. will have the ability to kind of cater the course to the strengths of their players, which is something I didn't even know was a thing, and I just learned it last week. As I'm asking this question, I continue to look at this European roster with the way Tommy's played this year, Rory at the top of his game. Rahm over Liv has not peak Rahm, but if he finds that thing that made him the most dominant golfer in the world a couple of years ago, they just feel like they're stacked to me, but we're at home. So before I move on to something else, who do you favor right now for the Ryder Cup that starts in 2 weeks?
Statistically, we have to favor the U.S. because they are home. This is a sporting event with one of the most stark differentiators between home and away performance that you see in across the whole spectrum of sports. And look, there's a slight advantage throughout sport to a home field advantage, but it's bigger on the Ryder Cup. Part of it is, as you just said, that the home team sets up the golf course, and don't ever overlook that. It's not publicized a lot, but it matters. But this is a raucous, noisy event. This is golf's version of the World Cup, and when you get a home team that for whatever reason, the year that it's in their nation starts making a run in the World Cup, they have a distinct advantage. And yet that's what's built into the Ryder Cup. So statistically, you have to look at it and say the U.S. team has an advantage. I look at the European team and come to a similar conclusion you do. This is a really great team. But I'm not really spending my time looking at the top players. I think the top players toe-to-toe, comparing our team to their team are pretty dang similar. You have noted that Captain Luke Donald did a great job with his captain's picks. He did. When you start looking at players 9, 10, 11, 12 on the European team, I think the European team is probably deeper than we are.
Oof. Well, cannot wait. It's going to be a lot of fun, Paul. What's coming up on the show tomorrow?
Well, some great stuff. We're going to talk about a remarkable event that took place at Riverside this week called Cougar Day. It is a biannual celebration of BYU men's golf, and it's a reunion of BYU players over the years. And this year, for whatever reason, so many greats from BYU's history were there. We're going to be talking about that and playing some tape from that event. And we will also be celebrating the Utah PGA the section championship that took place this week. Chris Moody did a remarkable and historic thing. He won the senior section championship last week, and he won the regular section championship this week. First time that's ever happened.
All right, Paul, thanks for the time, my friend. Have a great show. We'll chat soon. Thank you. See you, Spence. Ryder Cup 2 weeks from today. Should be a fun event. If you haven't watched it, it's very intense. It was my first time watching last time around in Rome when we got smoked, so hopefully the script has flipped a little bit. All right, 2 hours in the books, 2 hours to go. 4 o'clock hour, two of my favorite college football writers, Spencer Hall, then Chris Comrani. Then we'll get into the 5 o'clock hour of the show. We'll say goodnight at 6 on a Friday afternoon. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. University of Utah football with a potentially tricky road trip tomorrow. Heavy favorite against Wyoming. Gets weird in Laramie, though, as we know from the old Utah-Wyoming days. Our next guest, it's been too long, one of my favorite college football writers for a number of years, Spencer Hall, Friday afternoon. Spencer, happy Friday, man. How you been?
I've been great because there's football on. And also, I'm great because I definitely have something I can talk about with you locally, which is Devin Dampier. Like that, we got to start. We have football. This is going to go well.
Yes, sir. So let's get right into it. I mean, I don't know how good UCLA is, and I'm quite sure Cal Poly's not very good. But you're right. After a couple of years of frustration under center because of lack of health for Cameron Rising, this young man has inspired a lot of hope here through 2 games. What are your impressions of Devin Dampier, Spencer?
That this is finally Kyle Whittingham's like the paragon of, I think, what he wants in a quarterback, because the one thing that you're going to do, your production suffered against Cal Poly, so let's not slander them too much. Remember, against UCLA, I'm pretty sure you were up around 90% in terms of third down conversions, and you slipped to 9 out of 13 against Cal Poly. You really need to get that cinched up before you take on Wyoming. That's insane. That's a crazy number. That's a number that I put up in EA College Football, the video game, when I'm trying to annoy my opponent and I'm trying to just hold the ball for 6 minutes, which in real time would be like a 15-minute drive. Yeah, I love watching this offense. I love what they are doing, and I think it's everything that they want to back up what Utah already had on defense.
And just like Oklahoma, Spencer, we have a offensive coordinator who brought his quarterback with him, and so the familiarity between Devin and Jason Beck has bred some really fun early season results. What do you make of that dynamic, and is this a blueprint you think other programs will look at?
I think it's something that other programs are already doing. It's something that Zach Kitley's doing at FAU with his quarterback. It's something that wherever Lane Kiffin goes next, it's probably going to take Austin Simmons with him if you can. This is definitely something that you want to do, because more than ever, college football is about bringing some gear with you. There's not a lot of team cohesion anymore, at least not the kind of 4-year type cohesion that you might have seen 20, 30 years ago. What there is, though, is the chance to very quickly put together a series of systems and pieces that you already have. And the biggest pieces that you can do, that you can bring with you when you do that, it's the quarterback, right, on offense. And if you're, I guess it would be safety or middle linebacker if you were a defensive coordinator. I would be interested to see if other people had done that. I might have to look that up. But I love what Beck has done with the offense thus far. To me, Devin Dampier is – we talk about the negatives of the NIL and transfer era a lot. Let's talk about the positives, man. He was just sitting there. It wasn't like it took a tremendous amount of poaching from another Power 4 program. There's plenty of talent at that group of 5, even FCS level. We've seen that. Miami last year. Miami got a guy out of Incarnate Word indirectly. He came from Wazoo first, but the FCS, even at the FCS level, there's all of this talent that I think we either mis-scouted or that has developed to the point where it really can make an impact at the FBS and at the top tier of the sport.
Positional group that was most covered and talked about prior to the start of the season for Utah football was the offensive line, with Spencer Fano potentially being a top 10 pick and Caleb Lomu eventually believed to be that as well. He's only a sophomore. I had a friend compare them to bar bouncers as we were watching the Cal Poly game, because they just pick dudes up and throw them around. So, of course, Devin has played very, very well, but it helps when you've got 4, 5, 6 seconds in the pocket, doesn't it?
It does. And I know there's still concerns about, playmakers on the perimeter, and that's something that people do when you're playing well and you're looking for things to be upset about. I get that. However, if you have a functioning offensive line, congratulations. You're better than 60% of the teams out there at the FBS level. If you have a really good offensive line, which I think sneakily, I think Utah might have a great offensive line this year, then you're better than 90 to 95% of the teams. Everything else could be just a matter of scheme and making sure that you keep your quarterback upright. And Devin Dampier is crafty enough, I think, to decide when and where he's going to take the abuse that a quarterback who sometimes runs the ball and runs it really well is inevitably going to take.
So I know you're a guy that enjoys the college football dynamics. They can get weird from time to time, and Laramie, Wyoming, Spencer can get weird. They beat Texas Tech up there a couple of years ago. Texas had to rally in the second half not too long ago. Utah's a healthy favorite, and as I continue to say, while we wait for conference play to start, Texas Tech will be in Salt Lake City, and next week with Fox Big Noon here. Without really fully understanding whether or not this team has been tested, all they can do is do what they're supposed to do, which they've done so far. What should Ute fans hope tomorrow night looks like?
They should hope they don't remember this game in a month. That's what you should hope. You should hope that you go, oh, yeah, we played at Wyoming, and it was fine. That's what you really want to hope. Like, get Dampier out of there healthy. Make sure that you get, more reps for everybody. Make sure that you work some depth in and get some of your second stringers and third stringers in should you get a substantial lead. It is one of the enduring miracles of college football that Wyoming not only has an FBS program, but that they are sometimes pretty good. And weird things can happen. It is one of those. It's a Lubbock. And now that you're been in the Big 12 for a while, you're familiar with that term. It's a Lubbock. It's one of those places where when things get weird, they get real weird. You don't get it's not possible to just get a pint of weird there. You get a whole keg of weird usually.
Yes, and potentially several kegs in Wyoming and Laramie tomorrow night. Who's good in the Big 12? It's the second straight year where we're just trying to figure it out, and they took the right away from us to vote preseason, so there's no Big 12 preseason media poll after we were all completely wrong. It feels like Iowa State's good. It feels like Utah's good. And then beyond that, I think a lot of questions. Maybe TCU? Who do you think is good in this conference this year?
Yeah, UNC was so bad opening week that it's difficult to state just how good they're going to be. That feels, and then that's just me being kind of conservative with them. They look great. They finished the assignment the way that they were asked to do. I'm pretty sure Iowa State's good. Already 3-0, played a lot of different kinds of games against some different kinds of opponents, and they've already had one of the toughest matchups they're going to have, and they sort of gutted through that. Their 16-13 win over Iowa. So I trust them to be, if you're looking for a reliable football product, they're probably your steadiest bet at this point, right? I'm interested to see tonight. We've got Houston, Colorado, and I am very interested to see exactly what Houston might have schemed up because I've never seen a Willie Fritz team struggle for long. And they're always real mean, and their defense manages to go take big leaps from year one to year two. So I'm really interested to see that. Utah is as bankable as you can get. Like I said, I'm charter member of the Devin Dampier fan club. Hi, I'm willing to sign off. You guys have an offensive line, a defense, and a quarterback. Everything else I think you can work around. I'll take that. The most interesting team for me at this point is Kansas, just because I want to see if Jalen Daniels can continue. He's even in a loss, he's managed to play pretty well. And with that kind of experience and playmaking ability at quarterback, it's the kind of thing that in a league where nobody has every single duck in a row, your quarterback can make a big difference. So experience and explosive potential there, Kansas is always worth keeping an eye on here.
I want to ask you about a couple of other teams. Oklahoma State goes to Oregon, and when Dan Lanning wants to put it on you, Dan Lanning's going to put it on you, and Mike Gundy probably should have been a little bit more careful poking the bear. Deion Sanders learned that year one at Colorado, 69-3, and it was after three quarters. If they wanted to, they probably could have hung 100. And maybe Oregon's the best team in the country. I don't know, but how do you articulate just how far Oklahoma State has fallen under Mike Gundy?
That situation is bizarre to me because the primary friction a couple of years ago, at least, was the major booster for the program, T. Boone Pickens versus the head football coach, Mike Gundy, who felt unappreciated. T. Boone Pickens passes away. Suddenly, politically, the lane is clear for Mike Gundy to do exactly what he wants with the football program without much complaint or without much friction with his backers. And things have only gotten worse. He's been a coach who has not evolved at all to deal with the NIL era. And I do not think, by the way, that they're going to tolerate that for that long, because everybody who Mike Gundy had credit with, they've either retired, they've either moved on, they've either died, or they are fed up with him. That's the reality of where he sits. So I'm interested to see where they land in terms of of patience with Mike Gundy, because this, I think another byproduct of the NIL era is if we see clearly that you can't manage a roster and you can't develop that talent and prospect, and you're unwilling to, and you have already 20 years of experience at the program, the assumption to me seems you got to go get somebody else, and you got to do it fast. Because not only are you going to start losing to Oregon by 60 points quickly, you could turn it around quickly. So the potential of being instantly better, which is possible in the NIL era, and also being real bad real fast, that can make things very volatile.
BYU, like Utah, is clean through 2 weeks, but Portland State would probably lose to Corner Canyon, one of our better high school teams in the state. And Stanford is in the mix of trying to figure things out with Andrew Luck as the GM and Frank Reich as their interim coach for 1 year. But they're starting a true freshman quarterback in Bear Bachmeier, who wears number 47 and is built like a linebacker. I feel like that's something you would appreciate. I don't know where they exist in the landscape of the Big 12. I think if Jake Retzlaff would have not been suspended and ultimately transferred, maybe people would be higher on them. But your thoughts for BYU football through 2 games?
That they really shouldn't judge them through 3, because they're about to take what is a difficult road trip. Not that BYU is ever scared of taking those difficult road trips, but the west to east road trip to go play at a place that is live, East Carolina. If one has never been to Greenville and never been to the Pirate Bay, those people are lunatics. So this is going to be a very tough home environment for them to come into for BYU. So with Bear Bachmeier, a freshman on the road, the training wheels firmly on in terms of play calling there. Don't judge them with what happens in this game. Hope to come out with a dub if you can, because I think this is a bigger challenge than maybe they realize. Wait till we get through to your Colorados, to your West Virginias, everybody coming up on the schedule. Patience with the freshman quarterback. It's something that, this is another theme, by the way, that this year we have to have patience with our babies, because there's some very big, very pedigree babies on the line. Like you've got Bryce Underwood at Michigan, you've got Arch Manning at Texas, and inevitably, no matter how good we think you are, no matter how much we like you, you're going to look like a freshman, whether it's in game 1 like Arch Manning did. By the way, what were we doing judging somebody going to Ohio State in their first road game as a starter?
Mm-hmm.
I know he's not a freshman, but their first still really young quarterback, only a year on the bench, right? Goes directly into the frying pan with a lot of new parts at Texas. I'm amazed at how quickly people might jump to judgment there.
Well, same thing with what Brent Venables did to Bryce Underwood. I mean, he barely turned 18. He's a freshman, but he's just barely 18. And I think a lot of people around here, as we anticipate a BYU Utah game where you could have 2 teams that are 6-0. I mean, Morgan Scalley's got to be licking his chops at the thought of potentially scheming against a true freshman quarterback in Bear Bachmeier.
I'm sure it's something that he is absolutely salivating over. By the way, I don't want to hear from anyone about a first-year starter or a freshman quarterback unless you're facing a Brent Venables defense, unless your Dance Dance Revolution score is 90th percentile or above. Unless your pattern recognition and your quick twitch is that good, I don't want to hear it. Because if you look at what he was looking at and what he was seeing pre-snap and then post-snap, they do some very, very heinous things to a quarterback.
So since we're in the space, I referenced the dynamic, and if you watch John Mateer at Wazoo, it's not that surprising that he's looked the way he's looked. But Oklahoma, what are you willing to say about them after just 2 games?
I'm willing to say that the defense is very, very – I think they've gotten much, much better, and they were already pretty good, but they've gotten much, much better at doing a lot of the sleight of hand and pre-snap messing around that Venables likes to do, and they've gotten even better at executing it. So that's super promising for Oklahoma, because they do appear to have at least the passing game clamped down, and whether they can stand up to a burly running game, I don't know. We saw Michigan, they allowed yards on the ground, but it wasn't, 200 yards. It wasn't something that they couldn't live with. That's not the side of the ball that I'm concerned with. Right? It'd be interesting to see it stress tested a little bit more, especially with a more potent passing game, because that is something that, going back to Venables' days at Clemson, that's been where he's managed to take a couple of L's is when teams really open up and just start passing into all those open spaces that you get when you blitz and you constantly pressure and you're feinting before the snap and everything. What concerns me about Oklahoma is the offense, and not in terms of execution, because you've seen they can do it. It's keeping John Mateer upright, because Mateer takes a lot of hits, because Mateer is not huge. All right, he is not. He's not Bachmeier sized, to put it in terms your listeners will understand. He is definitely somebody who missed time last year due to injury and plays an extremely not risk averse, a risk friendly form of football. So keep him upright. That's what I really would like them to see. Is I would like to see both the offense call plays where maybe he's not exposed to as much damage, and where Mateer himself starts to go, man, I don't really need to go head first into that linebacker, which he still did against Michigan. A team that has absolute bruisers front and back in that defense. And I'm thinking, John, buddy, make it to game 6, make it to game 7.
Yeah, because some people feel the same way about Devin. Luckily, he only had 4 carries against Cal Poly after having, I think, 16 against UCLA. That's a tough thing, though, isn't it? Because you coach them to get down and slide, and then the danger is, do you kind of cut a little piece of what makes them special off their game, I
think there's a difference. Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I think that generally that sweet spot that you want is somewhere between 8 and 14 carries, 8 and 12 carries. You hear coaches say that a lot. You want them to actually carry the ball then you want them to threaten to carry the ball, twice that much. You want plays where that's enough of a danger that they have to honor that, and thus it opens up lanes for other runners, or it opens up passing lanes downfield. So you don't want to limit that. And I think there's just some players you can't. A lot of what's happening out there is so innate at a certain point that once pressure comes, they're going to take off. But when it comes to being close to the sideline, when it comes time to, if you're past that marker, go ahead and slide. Go ahead and slide. It's really not worth it.
So we had you on, Spencer, shortly after Kalen DeBoer was hired to coach Bama. Of course, he's a former Pac-12 friend of ours here in this footprint. And it's tough to take over for the legend, no matter who it is, especially a guy like Nick Saban. Do you think this is going to work? Is there a personality mismatch here? What do you make now that we've got a season, a couple games of a sample size?
I think it could still work. I do. But I think that what they need to do in order to sell the product, you have to sell hope. Most people don't think of it this way. Because usually the guy who has to sell hope for a program is the guy who comes in after the failure. He's following up a legend. So why should he sell hope? Well, you have to sell hope because right now the worst thoughts of an Alabama fan are the bottom 3 and 8, 4. That's the old, I say 3 and 8 because that is the record that Mike DuBose had in his worst year when they lost to Central Florida back in, I believe, I want to say that's 2001, 2000. It's anyway, a quarter century. That's the thoughts in the back of the oldest Alabama fans' head. I think they need to sell an exciting brand of football that wins, that makes people not want to sell your house out from under you, right? Don't put for sale signs in my yard quite yet. And I think that a lot of that hinges on the quarterback position for them. It's really whether Ty Simpson can become something that so far he has not been as starter, and whether they make a change there long term.
All right, before I set you loose, it's such a difficult sport to predict. It's such a difficult sport to project that you can only just kind of go off of what you've seen and what teams have done. And South Florida beat Boise State in Florida. Do they have a puncher's chance this week in Miami?
Absolutely. Byron Brown alone gives them a puncher's chance. Additionally, I don't think you've seen Miami pushed. And I say that because their primary test thus far has been Clemson, correct?
Yes.
And I think when you go, okay, in terms of explosive potential, are we really looking at a team that is superior to Clemson? Yeah, in every single way, especially offensively. Cade Klubnik does not run for the tough yards that Byron Brown does, nor does he move around and open up the kind of fields. He's closer to Devin Dampier than he is to Cade Klubnik. And that is very difficult for a defense to defend in 3-second increments, much less if the play extends past that. So, and also, I think you're seeing a higher grade, higher caliber of play caller there. I think the things they do offensively are way smarter than what Clemson does. Their receivers get more separation. That's one thing that's been damning Clemson, is they have been unable to develop the kind of receivers they had back during Clemson's, late 2000s, early aughts, run, where they had, your Nuke Hopkins all over the place. That's just, Justin Ross was kind of the last flash of that at Clemson. And then we haven't really seen anything like that since. USF has those guys. Nimrod in particular, the Tennessee transfer. He's been incredible. They have a very mythological offensive receiving core. They've got like Nimrod and a guy named Neptune. So not only are they colorful, they do get open, and that's a problem. And it'd be interesting to see, because Miami defensively has been greatly improved, but I don't think they've really been tested. So I'm interested to see about that. I'm also interested to see whether that South Florida defense can get Carson Beck to make some mistakes, because they did do some things that really limited Florida's ability to stretch the field, even more than Florida did.
If Utah and BYU are undefeated in October and 6-0, could we get a Spencer Hall reappearance in the state of Utah potentially?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that's a possibility.
All right.
That sounds delightful. By the way, again, Rice Eccles and Salt Lake as a venue, underrated would imply that anyone has not rated it. No, properly rated. Great. Like a phenomenal game day environment. Would repeat, but no look.
Well, we'd love to have you. If it happens, let us know. We'll get you in studio, Spencer. I always appreciate the time. Have a great weekend, okay?
All right, you too.
All right, Spencer Hall. He has long been one of my favorite college football writers. He has a newsletter called Channel 6. He's got a podcast. I don't think he's on Elon's platform much anymore, but you can just search Spencer Hall, Channel 6, if you're looking for some really good college football stuff. I want to let you know that you should go check out Stansbury Park Golf Course if you are a golfer. No long waits, no overpriced greens fees, just pure golf. Play 18 holes for only $45 and $50 on the weekends. It's right off of I-80, which is super easy to get to. Whether you're a weekend warrior or just need to escape the office grind, this is your spot. Head to Stansbury Park Golf Course and lock in your tee time before they're gone. Stansbury Park Golf, great rates, gorgeous greens, all just minutes away. You can book your tee time now at stansburypark.gov/golf course. That's stansburypark.gov/golf course. All right, good 4 o'clock hour, man. Coming up on the other side, another one of our favorites, Chris Kamrani. More college football comes your way on a Friday afternoon right here on ESPN 700. I'm debating this in my head because you simultaneously seem like the type of person that would either never go to Laramie or weirdly be excited about the prospect. Which is it?
Ooh, I've only been to Laramie twice in my life. Once for a Utah-Wyoming game during the 2008 season, and another time driving through while I was traveling across the country. One time was a great visit, the other time was not. But it in the summertime, it's beautiful. Campus is beautiful. Don't necessarily need a reason to go again. But you're not wrong. Like, I do have a soft spot for places in the country where most people think isn't the most ideal place to visit. Like, I love Reno. I'm a huge Reno guy, and you probably assume that because you know who I am. But like, I like the spots that maybe have a bad rap nationwide.
You know what's interesting is my cousin and his wife and their kids moved to Reno about 5 years ago, and I saw them this summer at our family reunion, and they love it. They absolutely love Reno, which would not have been on my bingo card outside of the fact that Reno 911 still holds up.
Still holds up. One of the greatest shows of all time. Great shout. You're 40 minutes from Tahoe. You're 3 hours away from the Bay Area. Underrated. It's the biggest little city in the world, as it says on one of the archways down there. I don't know. It is Americana at its finest. And as you know, as a West Coast snob, I'm always going to be trending in the direction of places that are unique and offer a specific glimpse into the American lifestyle.
And as someone who grew up on the right coast, it's probably the only thing that you and I will never see eye to eye about.
Yeah, I don't think I ever need to go to Connecticut unless I'm invited to Big Dave's house.
You don't love like a lobster boil with some Nantucket red pants that are too tight? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know anything that you just said, so I'm going to say no.
I actually think you would look fantastic in some Nantucket reds, CK.
All I think of, and I know it's a different state, but I just think of the guys on Wedding Crashers. Yep. When it's like, crab cakes and football. That's what Maryland's about. I think you could probably apply that to pretty much every northeastern state and have those guys. I'm sure there are lots of people who have several different types of blazers in their closet in the Northeast. I don't own a blazer, so maybe I should get on that.
I have several salmon-colored pieces of clothing in the closet. No, Bradley Cooper's character in Wedding Crashers, I went to high school with 15 of those days.
when he's signaling the blitz calls to himself and nobody else during the tackle football game, it's elite. So yeah, that's kind of what I would imagine that area being like. But I do need to get introduced to that, I think, on a more personal level, the same way I need to get introduced to places in the South where all the guys have like the bad Southern mop haircut and they all kind of look like the same. They're all wearing tucked in polos. And maybe they look at me out here and they say like, man, that guy needs a haircut. And maybe it's always up for debate, but I do need to get that specific slice of Americana that's beyond the West Coast in my lexicon for sure.
No, I mean, the nice thing about you're like Jerobi from Tribe Called Quest. There's this mystical feel. Like, you don't look like a Utahn, and I'm not profiling. I'm just saying, like, if somebody saw you, they wouldn't be like, oh, that dude's from Salt Lake. I don't know that they would be able to pinpoint it because you're like this mystical figure here, CK.
Ethnically ambiguous. I can be whatever you need me to be.
Well, what I need you to be now is a college football mind, which I know that you are. So we'll move over. I did have a Bradley Cooper, like when he was making the seal noises to impress the parents, just like perfect. But here's where I want to start. So Haley Sawyer, who is a young lady who covers USC, at this point, I just feel bad for her because she continues to get killed online. But she did an interview, which she probably should not have done, which essentially indicated she had no idea that USF even beat Florida after moving Florida up 2 spots and not having USF in her top 25. She said something like, I don't want to go too much into my process or logic. And you're like, okay, well, it's clear that you really don't have much. What's your take on this? And I've said this a million times, I do not want an AP top 25 vote. Like, I am not going to smash Indiana State tape when I get home. I'm going to go live my life. I'll watch the games I need to watch for the show. I'll watch the big marquee matchups with brand teams. But a lot of people have utilized this video to kind of expand it out to a macro conversation about the people that are in charge of covering the sport and being North Stars for folks that are trying to understand who's good and who's not. What's the CK take on this?
I think we touched on this a little bit earlier this summer when you were so kind enough to let me know that we're coming for the polls. I didn't know that people were coming for the polls. I don't think this development helps with those who maybe look down on the polls. I'm an old school kind of guy where like you can't necessarily take one misstep like this and then have it be such a wide-ranging application to all the other voters who, have been able to do this for a long time and take it seriously. Like everything else, I think it's more responsible to not overreact to something very minor. But in this day and age, I know that's asking too much of most people in our society. I can see how some programs might be frustrated by the fact that something so obscure can potentially put you behind the 8 ball when it comes to moving up the rankings to getting to a point where you can impress the college football playoff committee come November and December. But I'm also very old school. And then it's like, if you're looking to blame somebody else for your problems, then you probably have too many problems to sort through. And if you want to handle your stuff, and handling your stuff means win your games. So I know that might be a fairly cut and dry take, but that's where I'm at with this.
So in that vein, I started the show out with this today, and I will never back off my stance that this sport has a massive scheduling problem while being sensitive to the economic realities of smaller programs. I think both things can be true. As we've talked about, let's hold multiple thoughts in our heads, gang. We can do that. So, with that in mind, if you're Utah, if you're Texas Tech, which will not have been challenged at all prior to the game here in Salt Lake coming up. If you're BYU, the only thing you can do is do what you're supposed to do. Do what you're expected to do. And if you do that, the chips will fall where they're supposed to. Is it just fair to say that so far Utah's just done what they're supposed to do?
Very fair to say, but even though you should assume that a team as talented as Utah should handle its business in Laramie, I think it is, I guess I would say, if you're a Utah fan, don't assume anything is a done deal. A reminder for fans that I think just a few years ago, Wyoming beat Texas Tech before they had this infusion of, billionaire oil money and were able to secure the talent rights to so many players. But Laramie is a tricky place to go play, especially for a program that's trying to look for its first really kind of signature win under a head coach that's trying to prove themselves. We joke with the NFL, it's any given Sunday. We see it from week to week. It's any given Saturday as well. I mean, I know people thought USF was a talented team, but I don't think most people thought that they were going to go in and beat the Gators in the swamp. So Utah is the team that everyone expected it to be through the first couple weeks. And conventional wisdom points to the fact that they'll be able to handle their business in Laramie. They're pretty healthy, I believe, as Kyle Whittingham said this week to the local beat writers. So, yes, the answer is they, along with Texas Tech, will be rolling into next weekend's primetime matchup with not a lot of significant, tests solved under their belt. But that is the reality of college football in 2025. And in a different world, Spence, if you could have looked at this, non-conference schedule, and if you happen to have had a decent UCLA team to start the season, I think we're having kind of a different conversation than just saying like Utah will presumably enter week 4 starting their Big 12 conference schedule 3-0, having rolled over every opponent they've played. But it's not like it's a terrible non-conference schedule that was put in front of them. Now, I'm sure Kyle Whittingham didn't ever want another reason to go back to Laramie, but that's just the reality that you face from a year-to-year basis. And I think we're going to see non-conference schedules change and strengthen as you see, Utah's is significantly in the coming years. So you just got to play the games that are in front of you.
Yeah, and I continue to say, like, it's not BYU's fault that Stanford is in this weird transitional phase under Andrew Luck. It's not Utah's fault that UCLA, I think they stink. It's not Texas Tech's fault that Oregon State, after being on the wrong side of the Pac-12 exodus, is not the program they were once upon a time. But to your point, just you got to go win, and you got to go play the games that are in front of you. But you've got to do what we expect you to do, or else people are going to recalibrate the way they consider you and think what you're going to do the rest of the way. Since you've been to Laramie, if this game gets weird, what does that look like? The forecast is a little hairy. It's like 55 degrees and potential for rain. They've got a decent running back. PFF likes their linebackers. I have not been smashing Wyoming tape. CK, I'm not going to lie to you. But if this game gets weird tomorrow, what do you think that looks like?
Well, this game has gotten weird before. I don't know how many listeners remember that, this game was in Salt Lake, but in 2007, Kyle decided to onside a kick up 43 points, and their former head coach, Joe Glenn, flipped Kyle off from the other side of the field. I was a very green student reporter back then. I was at that game for that, and that was the talk of the press conference. So you follow that up with the year after. My first real trip to Laramie, it was like a 50-mile-an-hour wind day, very odd circumstances. It was a very sloppy game. Nobody could really throw the ball because it was so windy. And then, as I've told you before, on air and off air, driving back from Laramie to Salt Lake, we all got stuck on Highway 80 because a massive early October snowstorm blew in, and we were stuck on the interstate for like 9 hours. And Dirk Facer, bless his soul, kept calling and checking in on us. This is all to say that if the weather is weird, expect Jason Beck to run the hell out of the ball, as you probably should. And if you have the offensive weapons and depth that they believe they have, it's KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I don't think you need to necessarily risk even Devin Dampier. I'm sure he will have a presence in the running game because that's just his style of play. But yeah, it can get weird. Don't know how Wyoming's defense is schemed up for Jason Beck's offense, but they're familiar with it because they saw it last year at New Mexico. So, a lot of these coaches know Jason Beck's offense, and they know Devin Dampier as well.
Yeah, and Devin ran all over him. So
yeah,
we'll see if that's the case. Is there we had your buddy Spencer Hall on earlier, as always, very entertaining, fun. We were talking about the dynamic of John Mateer and trying to limit his carries so he doesn't get hurt. Devin goes for 16 carries against UCLA, 4 against Cal Poly. Is there a number that you'd like to see, like, pinpointed that makes the most sense? Because you can't just tell him to slide and get down. He's too dynamic with his feet to kind of take that portion of his game away. But what number feels right to make sure he stays upright as long as we possibly can?
Well, if you're asking me, and I know you are, because I have the type of mindset to be able to offer the type of analysis that fans really want to hear.
I know you do.
So last year, just looking at his numbers, he had 155 rushing carries in what is that, 12 games. That averages out to be, you know how to do the math, but that's probably too many. I think if you're a team that has Power 4 conference winning aspirations the way Utah does this year, I'd say combined between design runs and play breakdowns and needing to take off on your own, I'd say probably 10 to 12 if we're combining those. And again, I think Utah's offense is going to overmatch Wyoming, and up to the point where Jason Beck probably doesn't need to call that many design runs, maybe to get them out of a couple of hairy situations on, maybe 3rd and short or 2nd and short or whatever. But I think you're really going to have to see the balance struck correctly once you get into conference play, because those are when the games really matter. And obviously Utah starting off conference play with one of the best teams in the conference in theory next weekend at home. So I'll go 10 to 12. What about you?
Spencer said 8 to 12. So
okay.
2 college football geniuses in the 4 o'clock hour of the program dropping the same sort of knowledge. So there you go.
I'm glad to hear Spencer and I are still of the same mind.
Indeed. So last week, and look, I will do the irresponsible Utah Sports Talk radio host thing now. It feels like BYU and Utah have a chance to be clean when they meet in October. It feels.
Oh,
like
you're doing it.
I'm
doing
doing
it.
it. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. We're going there. The reason I bring it up is last week, there were some decent games on the slate. You try to get the Big 12 stuff in. You watch Utah, BYU, checking on Utah State, getting their heads kicked in by A&M. And then I sat down to watch Oklahoma, Michigan, and Brett Venables had Bryce Underwood in a nightmare. And I just wonder if it's too early to talk about the potential of Morgan Scalley doing the same thing to another true freshman in Bear Bachmeier.
It's a good train of thought, good analogy. I will be devil's advocate here and say BYU with back-to-back trips to East Carolina and Colorado with a first-year true freshman quarterback. I think that's asking a lot to be able to get through those unscathed, as well as a trip to Arizona. And if you're looking at Utah, Texas Tech, and then Arizona State, but I'm going to play along with the idea of that they're going to go into October 18th, both undefeated, and that you're going to have, everybody chomping at the bit to get here. Dave Portnoy, Pat McAfee, everybody's going to want to come to Provo for that.
Your boys.
Could Morgan Scalley, in theory, plan for making Bear Bachmeier's life terrible in Provo for a night? Yeah. But I think the reality is Aaron knows Morgan very well. Morgan knows Aaron Roderick very well. Last year was a great chess match between those two guys. In theory, BYU should have probably ran away with that game because they were the more talented team. They had so much more going for them. Utah was the team that should have won that game, even though they didn't. So this is all to say, once again, that when you talk about the rivalry game, records go out the window, and it's always going to be pucker up time for both sides. Will Morgan be able to present things for Bear that he probably hasn't seen before? Yeah, but Colorado's defense is very improved. You could say they're the strength of that team this year, and going to Boulder is going to be no easy feat. I don't know too much about East Carolina. I know they have a really cool logo. They barely lost to NC State on the road, so we'll know more about the Pirates in a couple weeks as well.
Chris, good morning.
Good morning.
See, I did the local Utah Sports Talk radio thing there for you. All right, couple minutes left. Let's be irresponsible. RSL. Yep. I'm doing it.
Yes.
I'm doing it. Tomorrow, back in action after the weirdest 3-week break. Your guy, Rafa Cabral, contract extension. 7 matches left. The narrative over there is this has been a mini camp, a mid-season mini camp to get DeAndre Yedlin, your boy, my guy, Victor Olatunji, and Porter's guy, Rowan Cruz, all kind of in the mix with Diego, even though he's been with the national team. He will be back for the game on Saturday. Expectations rest of the way for the lads?
Well, starting, you're basically in must-win mode, and that sounds corny, but 7 games left. I think if RSL has a legit shot at making it, you have to win the next 2 at home against KC and LAFC. LAFC on the road 4 days later is a tall task, but I'm going to say that RSL can't afford to lose more than 2 out of the next 5 games, or next 7 games, if they have any snowball's chance in hell of making it. You close out the year at Seattle, at St. Louis, and you have Rocky Mountain Cup decider first weekend of October, which I know you're just very, very nervous about.
Crappets.
If this is a mini camp for the team, probably sorely needed as you're getting a bunch of guys into the mix, but who's scoring goals and who's preventing them from scoring? Because as important as adding goal scoring talent was for this team, that Minnesota game was brutal on many fronts, and you can look at the back line as probably an area of need to try to bolster and fix or change going into the offseason. So I'll say RSL at minimum needs to win the next 2 before we can revisit this conversation of whether or not they have a chance to make it.
9 months away from the World Cup, a resounding defeat of the Japan side. Are we high speed ahead to the knockout phase now?
Resounding defeat of a rotated Japan side. We are not.
Okay.
The vibes are bad, man. Listen, I don't want to be the guy that says I told you so, but I just want you to remember that I said this before they even qualified for Qatar under a previous coach. There just is something missing from this group, and maybe it is the boomer in us who, watch those guys, really claw and scrape and headbutt and all get through the type of difficulties that the national team did for so long during its slow and steady rise. But there's just something off. I don't know how they're going to be able to get the country excited. I mean, Spence, it's insane that it's 9 months away and like nobody is talking about it. It's the single biggest sporting event in the world every 4 years, and like nobody is talking about it. And I think that's, probably in part because we get so used to what's in front of us, and what is so in front of us right now is American football, which takes up all of our time and energy 95% of the day. But I don't know, man. Like I am of the mind that I don't think that this is going to change the sport in the country forever. I just think it's another World Cup as soccer continues to grow. But it is wild to me that like nobody is just like kind of really just talking about the fact that we're hosting the World Cup for the first time in 30 years just next year.
Talk about it on the drive, Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 live every day. You know that.
2 to 6 or 2 to 5?
Stop it. That's enough. We'll let you go. Have a good weekend, Chris.
Thanks, man.
All right, Chris Camerati, damn it. He's not supposed to. You know what? CK is suspended next week without pay.
Okay.
We don't pay him. But he's still suspended next week.
Still suspended? Okay.
All right. We will catch a break. We have 3 hours in the books. We have 1 hour to go. College football starts tonight, and there's a Big 12 game that kicks off in just about 30 minutes. Colorado and Houston. Final hour of the show, Friday afternoon on the other side on ESPN 700. We outlined the specific weather patterns for the state of Utah earlier in the show. Porter, would you please remind our listeners what tends to happen as we get a little bit later and later in the calendar?
Yeah, as we get closer to the winter months, what you typically refer to as the winter months, it's going to get a little colder, a little darker, quicker, less sunlight day to day, a little more moisture, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully a little more moisture.
Well, we need it. I mean, as you remind us every day, we need it.
Thank you for being on point there. We do need it. A big old winter if we're lucky. But, yeah, it's not going to be cold in Laramie, but it might be a little windy. It might be a little wet, might be a little rainy. And on your way, you may see a little snow in the mountains. It's getting close.
It is getting close, and we educated you on the weather pattern here in the state to encourage you to enjoy this weekend because the weather looks pretty good. We're looking at mid-70s, some sunshine. So we're hoping people capitalize and take advantage on the nice weather now because, once again, to reiterate, as we get later in the calendar, nice weekends will go away.
I'm just hoping everyone's driving to Laramie this weekend. I don't care what they do with the weather. I don't care if the weather's bad. Just drive to Laramie, snow, rain, or shine, and have a good weekend.
Are you ready for my final score prediction, Utah, Wyoming?
I am.
You save yours because you're hosting our pregame. In fact, let's hear. What's the deal with pregame tomorrow starting at 2 o'clock?
Yeah, pregame show starting at about 2 o'clock live from Laramie. Myself, Trevor Riley, Zach Moss. You'll hear from Kyle Whittingham at his weekly press conference. All of that brought to you by our friends at Outlaw Distillery. I think that's fitting for a matchup between the Utes and the Cowboys.
I'm going to say Utah 41, Wyoming 10.
Okay. That is going a little bit over on the over-under.
It is, and also Utah covering the spread by a pretty wide margin.
Correct. And like you said, I'll save mine. I think we're going to go under, though. I think the total is going to be under that number, and we'll see. We'll see. The weather, as Chris Kamrani alluded to, may have a play in that one.
Pro Football Focus, their grades for Wyoming so far through 2 games. They really like their running back, who's averaging over 5 yards per carry. Now, of course, the context is Akron and Northern Iowa, all due respect. Caden Anderson is their quarterback, who's a true pocket passer. Sam Scott is their running back, who's averaging over 5 yards per carry. And this Braden Johnson kid, PFF has him graded as their best player. He's a linebacker on that side of the football. So there you go. You are going to be live in Laramie, correct? You are heading to the Porter Larson Bowl.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the itinerary locked? Do you have the itinerary locked down?
For the most part. An itinerary in Laramie is a little different. A little different than there's no big 5-star hotel. You're not getting the press room at like we do at the Rose Bowl. So the itinerary is just football and that steak that Keith recommended the other day. I'll find that.
Yeah, shout out to our guy Keith, play-by-play voice of the Cowboys. If you missed that interview at the very end, he gave you like 3 or 4 recommendations where you could go eat or maybe grab a beer. Problem is, one of the recommendations was like a 45-minute drive away from Laramie.
Which, we got time. Maybe hang around Sunday.
What do they have to eat in the Wyoming press box for media members? Flying J turkey sandwiches?
That's a good question.
Feels like a corn dog media room, potentially.
A corn dog?
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. Last time I was in Laramie, I had a buffalo steak. So hopefully that's the direction.
If they serve buffalo steak to the media, that would be the biggest upset ever.
They don't, but maybe when number 20 Utah's in town. I don't know.
Well, like I said, Porter, before we say goodnight, give me your thoughts on this. Like, once upon a time, we used to say, man, this is a chance to put out some tape for the NFL to prove that maybe you can be a pro football player. If you're playing for Wyoming, based off of what our guy Keith shared earlier, when he asked me if Utah is a full $20.5 million rev share team, which they are, according to Mark Harlan, according to the AD, they're utilizing every penny of it. I want to say the number he gave me is Wyoming's paying, what, $2.5, $3 million? Is that what he said?
And I think most of that's to a couple players, right? Your top flight guys.
Yeah, so these days, you want to put tape out there. Like if I put myself in the mindset of this Anderson kid, this linebacker, I want to leave that game tomorrow getting Kyle Whittingham's attention or Morgan Scalley's attention, right? So when it comes to the transfer portal, maybe you get a phone call from a head coach who's like, dude, you balled out against Utah. I'm going to pay you $400,000 to come play for me for a year. Like, they will be at Colorado next week, and so there'll be a lot of eyes on them against the Buffs as well. But if you're a Wyoming football player, tomorrow's could potentially be the biggest night of your life. That cannot go understated.
Yeah, and listen, this isn't necessarily new in college football, but it is very much it's becoming a bigger thing because of the NIL space, because of the transfer portal. I think of a guy in Levani Damuni who I watched him as Stanford visited Utah for their final time in the Pac-12. Levani was awesome against the Utes. I don't know how many folks remember, but he was a monster. He was really the only bright spot on the field for what was not a very good Stanford team. And I remember after that game, Levani Damuni, who he's a local guy, so there's already ties, but after the game, I saw him talking to Utah coaching staff, right? And that was Utah Stanford. That wasn't Utah Cal Poly or Utah Wyoming. And then last week, Trevor Riley and I on the pregame show, we kind of had this conversation, Spence, about Cal Poly doing the same thing. That's where Fred Whittingham started. That's where Kyle grew up a little bit. So there's already a connection there, and you got to think that some players on that sideline, if they catch the right people's attention, are going to, put their names out there, whether it's an opposing coach or whether it's a different coach across the country watching you on the only maybe nationally televised game you have that year. These games serve as a opportunity for some of these smaller school players to get their name out there. Yes, for the NFL draft, but also for big-time college football programs and, of course, just to get more film out.
Yeah, the ability to make money if you jump up to P4 is something that has changed the dynamic of games like this. I do feel like it will be another anxiety-free Saturday night for Utah fans. Want to remind you the kick is 6 o'clock at CBS Sports Network, but our pregame coverage begins at 2, and we'll have 10 hours of Utah coverage for you as your home of the Utes. All right, Porter, before we get out of here, so you can start the long trek to Laramie, what comes our way on a Monday edition of the show?
On a Monday edition of the program with Scott Mitchell, I believe. Bill Riley will join the program. Keith Kelly will join the program for a little react of Wyoming Cowboys. We'll go through our Big 12 power poll, and Josh Furlong will stop by the program as well, as we do each and every Monday. I'll be up on the Hill in the morning for Kyle Whittingham's press conference, and we'll bring that to you a little later on as well.
There you go. So you guys have a great weekend. Thank you for making us a part of your day today and the week all week. I know it really has been for a lot of you. I have felt the heaviness too, so I'll just hope for good things and send a lot of love and good wishes out to everybody who's had a really heavy week as a result of some really, really heavy things. Enjoy your weekend. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. Special thank you to Bo McNally, Sammy Mora.